One of the remarkable things about regional air pollution, sort of air pollution that blankets the whole basin, is the variety of impacts that it has. It's bad for the lungs. It causes lung cancer, certainly exacerbation of asthma. It exacerbates chronic obstruction of pulmonary disease, but it also has an impact on other organs in the body. We have some studies in which we've seen associations between air pollution and autism in children, and with a whole variety of other health endpoints that are major causes of chronic disease of modern life.
So here in the Los Angeles Basin, the general metropolitan area, we have specific problems in the area, particularly of air pollution, particulate matter, which you can think of as little pieces of dirt floating in the air, and ozone, which we're infamous for in Southern California. Those have long-term effects and short-term effects on the people living in this region.
It's been well established by decades of research that exposure to particulate matter is associated with increases in daily mortality, long-term increases in mortality, and in fact, in places where particulate matter has been reduced, you see decreases in death rates, really dramatic decreases.
Across California, there are about somewhere in the order of 7,000 deaths a year that can be attributed just to heart attacks and heart disease from this fine particulate matter, sort of regional particulate matter that blankets the whole area.
It's cancer, it's respiratory health, it's asthma, it's diabetes, and it's cardiovascular health. All of which, by the way, are the top reasons why Americans die, and die early.
Imagine this glass jar represents the air quality in Southern California before rapid population growth during the 20th century. With a dramatic increase in population came industrialization, including manufacturing facilities, refineries, power plants, smoke, fumes, and an ever-growing number of automobiles. Rapid industrial progress during World War II boosted the region's economy and created thousands of good jobs. However, industrialization also brought new waves of smog, and by the late 1940s, air pollution in Southern California had reached critical levels. Something needed to be done. Agencies were formed, regulations were established, and slowly the tide of air pollution began to ebb. Great strides were made during the 1960s, 70s, and 80s with significant reductions in emissions from most all the major sources of air pollution. But there is still more that needs to be done.
Over the last 40 years, almost all of the regional pollutants have decreased pretty consistently. That's a triumph. It demonstrates what we can do if we put our mind to it and make the kind of decisions as a society that we need to reduce air pollution exposures.
So many people think that because air pollution seems so overwhelming, there's nothing I can do. It's sort of beyond me. It's somebody else's problem. It's a big issue. We can't take care of it. But really, the choices you make in your everyday life do affect air quality.
When we consume, when we buy things, we ought to be more conscious about where things are produced, where things are made, but also about the idea of how did it get to my hand? What is the footprint of this item?
Everyone, wherever they live, has the opportunity to impact our environment, to impact the air that we breathe, if you want to say that. And little things help. So one of the things that we discuss here at Loma Linda is lifestyle.
What I told my parents and the kids is, instead of driving your car to practice, to the games every day, polluting diesel, polluting internal combustion engines, drive an alternative fuel vehicle, compressed natural gas, plug-in electric, all electric, hydrogen fuel cell, or there's alternative forms of transportation. Take mass transit. Every week I ride my bike to work, 10 miles to downtown Los Angeles. Every week I take the train. We can all do something to reduce pollution from mobile sources and clean up our air and protect the health of all our children.
So we're not necessarily trying to convert people's lives entirely to have them drop a car and pick up a bike. We just want them to address those short distance trips that represent trips to the market, trips to get a haircut, trips to get a local sandwich at a local business. We really want them to start considering bicycling for those short distance trips.
One thing we could do to help clean up the air is be part of the change. I don't think you have to be drastic, but just one day a week. Walk to school with your kids. Walk to the cafe instead of driving. Enjoy our neighborhoods and be out on the streets and sidewalks and with your neighbors.
My name is Esteban Gajardo and I take the bus to work.
My name is Sofia Menemelis and I practice sustainability by using compost to grow plants and using water from a rain barrel to water the plants.
My name is Antonio, and I started an idling awareness campaign at my school. So if you have to idle more than 10 seconds, turn off your car.
To reduce our carbon footprint,
instead of buying bottled water, we filter our water at home.
One thing I can do to reduce my carbon footprint, shorter showers.
I parked my gas-guzzling SUV, and I went all electric for a net savings of $200 per month.
Hi, I'm Herb, and I ride my bike to the farmer's market for fresh fruits and vegetables.
I have a sister with severe asthma. Just last month, in 1 week, she went to the emergency room 3 times, and I don't think anyone should have to go through that. I lost an uncle to severe asthma. He went into the hospital claiming that he was having like a minor asthma attack, but he just couldn't control it and never came back out. Nobody should have to go through that. It's inhumane.
I help reduce air pollution levels in my community by taking the bus home, or if I miss the bus, I walk home, like right now.
In the Pino family, we
turn off lights when we leave the rooms.
Today, there are more than 17 million people living in the South Coast Air Basin. Tomorrow, there will be more. Our region needs a strong economy and clean air. So, if each of us can do one thing, make one change in our lifestyle, make one choice that reduces our carbon footprint on the planet, we can have a profound effect on the quality of the air we breathe and the quality of life we live in Southern California. Imagine what we can accomplish if we all just do one thing.
If I could call the members of the South Coast Air Quality Management District Governing Board to the dais. Is this microphone on? If I could call the audio man. we could please get the governing board members to the dais. No, I'm good. Thank you so much. I'm sorry?
Yes. You got 2 mics?
Yes. Oh, great. Okay, I got it. I got it. Here we go. Here we go. Now we have a forum. Now we have a vice chair.
How are you, sir?
Right here. Right. Right here. Is he coming today? Oh, fantastic. Great. Great. How are you doing? Okay. District Governing Board meeting. I'd like to ask Supervisor Benoit, since he's up, to lead us in the pledge. Please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation for all. Who we get to decide? Are there any opening comments by any of my colleagues?
Good morning, everybody. I just want to mention a couple things that I had in my schedule in the last month. I participated in Sacramento in a roundtable at the Diesel Technology Forum, and this included a number of OEMs, a lot of government agents, and OEMs were Volvo, Caterpillar, Cummins, Daimler, John Deere, CNH, Neste, which makes renewable diesel, and as I said, Volvo, the truck that we helped fund, was there, and it was pretty impressive truck. Then I also participated. The South Bay Services Environmental Committee has a green building challenge, and so they invited me to their awards ceremony, which was pretty interesting. Some very good things being done by businesses in the South Bay region, Raytheon and a number of others. So just wanted to mention those two things. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Oh, sorry.
Easy to make that mistake. As the chairman of the Board of Supervisors and Riverside resident for many years, I want to just say welcome to everybody to the historic Mission Inn. For those of you who haven't seen it before, and I've run into a few, are somewhat surprised by the unique and beautiful opportunity we have here in Riverside to show this place off and see it for the first time, had that chance. For for allowing us to go on a little tour. A number of us had a chance to. CARB will be building their new facilities here in Riverside. They're about a mile apart, about 2 miles from here, and I continue to believe, and I think many who saw CSERT for the first time last night understand now why I thought it was such a terrific opportunity to have these great research organizations so close together, both of them focused for decades on air quality. So welcome to Riverside, and I'm glad you had a chance to see that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And we should note, too, that the Air Resources Board is coming out to work with CSERT in a few years, relocating here to Riverside. There were a few things we did this month. I did it with other board members, including a tour of Boeing. Remember early on, last month, we did that. We had the joint board meeting with the San Joaquin Valley Air Pollution Control District, and that was pretty interesting, and maybe staff could summarize that at some point. We had a meeting in Torrance about the emergency plans and risk response, risk management issues at the refineries, along with the Environmental Protection Agency. But the one I wanted to talk about, and Paul's got this, a couple of slides here, is after that Torrance refinery meeting, Wayne Nastry and Mark Abramowitz and I went to the Chevron refinery and got to tour what they call their ROC, their Refinery Optimization Center, where they have taken the, I think it was 9 different operations throughout the refinery and centralized them into a single control center. And it is pretty incredible. It cost them quite a bit of money to do it, but they immediately made their money back because the refinery improved its operational capabilities and its safety performance immediately. And it made me think, there's another slide too, Paul, if you want to show that one. It made me think about how some things we can pass regulations and regulate and get emission reductions, but this investment by Chevron has led to emission reductions and also improved their bottom line because they're functioning and they're operating more than they were before, and they're operating more safely. So I wanted to bring that to the attention of everyone and thank Chevron for providing the photos. It was fascinating.
And their contribution to your...
0. Can you believe that? But I've got so many conflicts today, you won't even believe it.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I just want to thank the board for having this mobile source, or this mobile meeting, governing board meeting at a location that's near mass transit. I was able to take the Metrolink train from Union Station to Riverside. Actually could have taken it to the next stop, which was only a few hundred yards from CSERT, I realized later on. And if we could do one next year, make sure it's near mass transit. It's so easy as I was riding in the Metrolink train at 4 o'clock on a Thursday afternoon, watching traffic bumper to bumper on the 90, et cetera. So thanks a lot.
I want you to know I was coming with you on the train. It was Dr. Parker who stopped. I can show you his text. I think you're too young to see it.
But you carpooled.
Yeah, I did carpool. There you go. I'd like to thank Supervisor Benoit because for putting together that tour last night. I'm not really a big tour guy. I rarely go on tours after all this time. You know, I've toured out, but I enjoyed it immensely, and it was very educational, and I hope it inspires me to go on more tours in the future so that I can stay abreast of the last time I was at UC Riverside was the last time we were here, and I think that was probably 6 or 8 years. You were here, Katsioni. That was one of your first meetings.
It was either 2008 or 2009, that's correct.
Right, so it's 7 years ago. It's just amazing the facility that they've developed and the technology they have, and I'm really happy I saw it. Today we have, is there any other comment by any other board member? Mr. Nastry, do you have some comments?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. At our last board meeting, we discussed the hearing board and the need for a review of the hearing board.
Yes.
We have since hired James Strock is the first Cal EPA Secretary and former Assistant Administrator for the Office of Compliance and Enforcement for US EPA. He'll be conducting the review of the hearing board operations beginning this month. So I just wanted to report back on that. And then with regards to the agenda, staff would like to pull item 34 for further consideration. This was the item that was related to BACT and the BACT Advisory Committee, where we were trying to achieve consensus with the advisory committee, and we had promised that we would pull that item should we not be able to achieve consensus.
Item 34. Help me. All right. If I could please have Sandra McDonald come to this stage. Why don't you come up? Oh, yeah, back here. It's something that's a little tight. It's a little tight up here. Here, too. Oh, you look wonderful today. Retirement club, huh? Somebody said if Kelly has spent some money here that he wasn't supposed to spend. I have to tell you, this is amazing for me. Just absolutely amazing.
For me as well.
I look at you every month, and you represent the fountain of youth to me. There could be, you don't look like you should be in the 10th grade, no less. Sandra has a 32-year career at the South Coast. She was hired as a deputy clerk transcriber. Became quickly efficient in her assignment duties and did so by taking her own initiative to learn and improve. In a short time, Sandra was promoted to senior deputy clerk and worked in that capacity for 15 years. In February of 2003, she was appointed the clerk of the board. Man, I remember that like it was yesterday.
Seems like it was.
Because I never thought that other woman was going to leave. and I liked her, but she, and her daughter, whatever. Do you ever know what happened to her daughter?
She's, I think she's doing well as a chef.
Yeah, she was a chef. In this imperative role for the district, Sandra has handled the duties and responsibilities of her office with the utmost professionalism and dedication. Moreover, she brings a warm personality and a positive attitude in her daily interaction with board members, staff, and members of the public. Some of you may know that Sandra met her husband, Kevin, while they were both working here at the district. It was part of our Share the Ride program. They have now been married for over 20 years and have 4 children and 2 grandchildren. You got one more grandchild than me. Now, as you may be asking yourself, why isn't Kevin up here to celebrate his retirement? Sandra said somebody's got to work. My understanding is that Sandra gets to retire, but Kevin has to work a few more years, which is absolutely good news for the district. One of the first things Sandra plans to do on retirement is go to the Caribbean on a cruise to celebrate, relax, and have some fun. She is also looking forward to having some time and energy to regularly attend her jazzercise class, as well as doing more hiking and bicycling. We're going to send you over this. And if you can keep up with him, you're doing great. Finally, she is really looking forward to being able to spend more quality time with her family. Sandra, you have been an invaluable member to this team over the past 30 years. Your diligent support to the executive office, staff, the governing board, and the hearing board will really be greatly missed. On behalf of the governing board, I want to congratulate you and thank you for an outstanding career here at the South Coast.
Thank you.
I wish they all could have been like you. You've been just phenomenal, just phenomenal.
Thank you so much. That means a lot to me.
And the Vice Chair has a piece of crystal for you.
Oh, beautiful.
Would you like to say a few words? Uh-oh, here comes the reverse.
Okay.
You can't cry.
Okay.
There's no crying in baseball.
I've worked at the district for more than half of my life and have had a front row seat to the big show, governing board meetings, and the smaller, usually smaller, show, hearing board, where you hear from the individual businesses and at times from the community residents affected by the emissions from these facilities. And I've always felt proud to be a part of an agency that has effected positive changes for the benefit of the public. I have made friends and family here at the district, and I will miss that daily interaction. I am especially proud of the ladies in the clerk of the board's office that I have worked with over the years. They have been tremendously supportive of me, and they know their jobs and do it so very well. I know they will carry on and continue to provide excellent support to the boards. Any success I have had could not have been possible without them. Over the years, there have been many different board members, and I believe both boards have benefited greatly from the many years of guidance and leadership from Governing Board Chairman William Burke and also Hearing Board Chairman Edward Camarena. I believe they have like 20 years each. I think that's just great. Kudos to them. Kudos to them. There have been many changes over the years, reorganizations and staffing, but the district has continued to move forward, and that is what I would encourage. Just continue progress towards achieving better air quality in this region for the health of all of us living here. Thank you so much.
You don't have to leave. If you like it so much, we can keep your office open Monday morning.
I wish I could stay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mike's here. You gotta put his chair back.
Why don't you take out Sean's chair so he gets here?
Take out that chair.
Is Sean coming today? Is Sean coming today? He is coming today? Well, we'll get it. Good morning, Supervisor. I'm taking the supervisor's microphone. That was really nice, and Sandra, I can't tell you how much everybody on this board, I think, will miss you because you are a very special person. And I'd like to add to my colleagues, my thanks to you for all you've done during my term as chairman. Okay, moving to the consent calendar. Items 1 through 23. Yes.
I'm going to ask to recuse myself on item number 7. I have received a contribution of over the $250 from West Coast Turf.
Okay.
As I've got a long list here, so bear with me. I need to recuse myself from items involving contracts with those who made charitable contributions to my employer, the Coalition for Clean Air. I'm recusing myself from items 3, 5, 6, 7, and 16. So I'll go through this as quickly as I can. Recusing myself from agenda item number 3 because Port of Long Beach is a potential source of income which is materially affected by this item. I'm recusing myself from agenda item number 5 because Cummins Westport Incorporated Clean Energy Southern California Gas Company are potential sources of income which are materially affected by this item. I'm recusing myself from agenda item number 6 because Bay Area Air Quality Management District and Sacramento Air Pollution Control District, which I believe is Sacramento Metropolitan Air Pollution Control District, are potentially sources of income materially affected by this item. Recusing myself from item number 7 because Foothill Transit is a potential source of income materially affected by this item. And I am recusing myself from agenda item number 16 because Foothill Transit, Southern California Association of Governments, City of Riverside, Los Angeles County Metropolitan Transit Authority, and Riverside Transit Agency are potential sources of income which are materially affected by this item. Thank you.
I do.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you. For agenda item number 16, I do not have a financial interest, but I'm required to identify for the record that I'm a regional council member for the Southern California Association of Governments.
Mr. Chairman, as well, item number 16, for full disclosure, I too have, I don't have a financial interest, but am required to identify for the record that I am also a regional council member for SCAG and a member of the board of directors for the county sanitation districts, which are involved in this item before us. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Also on item number 16, while not required to rescue myself from the item, for the record, I'm a member of the Board of Directors of the Southern California Regional Rail Authority, the California Sanitation District, Los Angeles County, Los Angeles County Metropolitan Transit Authority, also a member of SCAG and a member of the supervisor for the County of Los Angeles and the Department of Public Works.
Mr. Chair, for agenda item number 16, I do not have a financial interest, but I'm required to identify for the record that I am a member of the Board of Directors for the Southern California Regional Rail Authority and a regional council member for the Southern California Association of Governments, which are involved in this issue.
Mr. Chair, I am recusing myself from item number 16 because of a campaign contribution from Athens Services within the last 12 months.
And I also need to recuse, or not recuse myself, but sorry, just note for the record, on item 16, I'm also a committee member just on the Transportation Committee at SCAG.
Mr. Chairman, myself as well, I'm also a committee member at SCAG on the Transportation Committee, but don't have to recuse myself on item 16.
16. Are there any other board members who would like to recuse themselves from other items? Hearing none, I will accept a motion.
Oh, Mr. Chair, I would just like to pull one item on the consent calendar.
Sure.
Item number 10.
Got it. The consent calendar, 1 through 23, pulling 10.
I'll move the remainder of the consent calendar, Mr. Chair.
Any opposition? Hearing none, the consent calendar is approved. Item number 10.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was going to make a comment about this, but I withheld it till the item came up. I'd received, this is, item number 10 is an executed contract regarding auditing the money we get from the motor vehicle registration fund, AB 2760 we hand out. It's a charge on the vehicle registration. We're auditing all the cities that get the money, the counties, agencies. I received a call this past week from the LA County Metro Board Chair and Duarte City Council member John Fasano, who was very concerned. You know, there's a measure on the ballot in November, Measure M, for mass transit. He called me, he said he was at a couple city council meetings where some councils, like southern area, were discussing their opposition to certain measures on a ballot, and they were talking about using 2766 money as part of the campaign to, and I called Kurt on this because Kurt was able to, thank God Kurt was involved, he was able to review the council meeting minutes. And Mr. Fasano was very concerned that several cities were talking about using this money to oppose the initiative, and on the grounds of or maybe an informational campaign. And I asked Kurt to call the Metro chair. So I just wanted to bring this to the attention of the board. Maybe Kurt can just make a couple comments for a minute. Wayne, I want to thank Kurt for calling Mr. Fasano. Mr. Fasano was grateful for the call.
Sure. Yeah, I did talk to Mr. Fasano. Derek Alatorre and I reached out to the city manager for the city of Cerritos and also to the chair of the South Bay COP, who seems to have had a role in this whole thing too. So hopefully that puts an end to it.
And just for the audience sake, Kurt, this money is supposed to be used for motor vehicle emission reductions? Or?
Yeah, the money's, there's a provision in the Health and Safety Code that provides that the monies are required to be used for motor vehicle emissions reductions.
With that, I move approval of this item, Mr. Chair.
We have another comment by Supervisor Andalovich.
That should be completely illegal. There ought not to be any wiggle room in that. And if they are using those funds, I mean, that is a clear violation of the law. Correct?
You're right, Supervisor.
So have they appropriated funds already for that?
In at least the case of one city, the city council had voted to approve the use of the funds. They characterized the effort as an education and outreach effort. So I think on the constitutional issue that you may be focused on, Supervisor, they're kind of skirting along the margin of that one. The AB 2766 issue, using the monies for purposes other than reducing motor vehicle emissions, I think is a little more clear-cut. And so again, Derek and I called the city manager for the city of Cerritos and told him you can't do it.
So when they vote it, they're not going to appropriate?
I'm not sure what exactly their process is, but...
So who is the agency that tells them they can't appropriate? Is it the Air Quality Management District? Is it the district attorney of the county of Los Angeles?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, I certainly told them that they couldn't do it. I mean, the ultimate safeguard on all this is an audit, right? In fact, you just...
The election's in 35 days, 25 days, or whatever. I mean, yes.
Yeah. My guess is they'll find the money someplace else. It was $10,000.
Who has the power for the injunction to prohibit that to get a clarification from the judge? Do we have that authority to ask you to put in an injunction from any appropriation and let them take it to court?
I suspect that we do, Supervisor.
Okay.
I don't know.
Could you check during this meeting if we have that authority to direct you? I mean, time is of the essence. November 8th is right around the corner.
I will do that.
Okay, thank you, sir. Sure. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, following up on Supervisor Antonivich's comment, is it possible we could direct staff just today to draft a letter? And the policy position of this board is that these funds are supposed to be used for these specific purposes, A, B, C. We understand that there was discussion of using it for alternative purposes, as Mike said, and that this is prohibited under the Health and Safety Code pursuant to these provisions. So maybe an immediate letter going out this week so we can prevent this from occurring in other cities, and they're on notice. If they violate this, we'll pursue other legal remedies available to us. Would that be okay?
Certainly, I can do that as well.
But your first choice would be, if it's illegal, you want to take legal, get an injunction like Monday, right? If it's illegal. Okay. Okay. Are you through, Mr. Nasser?
Should we get a vote on this?
I would just add, Mr. Chairman, that this is an issue that I think we want to make sure all the recipients are aware of. So while Kurt will look into this specific issue, we'll also make sure that we do a broader notification to all parties and reinforce what the funds are to be used for, and to remind them of the pitfalls, if you will, of deviating from that and potential ramifications. So we will address the issue that's been raised and also reach out on a broader scale.
I made a motion to approve, but I'm not sure if there's a second.
I'll second.
Any opposition? Hearing none, it is approved. Item 25 through 31.
So I would like to pull item 28, which is the Stationary Source Committee meeting minutes, but also I'd like to ask staff, we've got a lot of people that are standing in the back. I hope they don't have to stand for the whole meeting. There's a bunch of seats up here with reserved tags on them. Are those people showing up, or can these people sit there? There's also some more seats up here.
It's like church. Nobody wants to sit in the front.
We don't bite often. Come on up if you'd like to take a seat. Just
Are you
staff.
Are you sure you don't want to come and sit down?
If they want to sit in these reserved seats, can they do that? Okay, so forget the reserve signs up here. Just come sit up here if you want to. I don't want to make you stand the whole meeting. Anyway, I'd like to pull 28.
You're up.
I think we had public comment on that. Did we? Do we have public comment card on that one? Yeah, we
On 28?
Yeah. Yeah, I know she's here. I saw her.
Okay. Angela? Are you here? Yes. There you are. I want you to know that your ears should have been burning because Dr. Lou and I were talking about you, I think, a couple of days ago. He was singing your praises. Okay, we need to get her microphone turned on. There you go. You got it. You got it. Like magic.
Good morning.
Morning.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, I'm Angela Johnson-Mazzaros from Earth Justice, here today on behalf of Sierra Club. I submitted a letter that I'd appreciate if you take some time to review, but I wanted to quickly point out some of the comments that I made there. You know, my grandmother used to tell me, and we've all heard the old adage, if you find yourself in a hole, stop digging. As Dr. Burke pointed out recently, this region is experiencing nearly 6,000 deaths per year because of our air quality. And I know we're struggling right now to develop a plan to deal with our worst in the nation air pollution. And here, I'd like to talk about Rule 1304.2, which was heard in the Stationary Source Committee, because that rule is a rule that affirmatively brings air pollution to this region. While we're trying to figure out how we're going to come up with $14 billion to address our current air pollution problem, we believe that this board ought to be doing everything it can, everything in its power, to make sure that we're not adding more fossil fuel pollution to the region. This rule, far from a bridge to the future, is really an anchor to our fossil fuel past. And as the legislature made very clear this year, the future is in storage. Storage for dealing with our energy issues is clean, it's available, it's efficient, and it's cost effective. This board should do everything in its power to make sure that policy is shaped so that we are not bringing fossil here, and it's so clear that there are easily available, readily available alternatives. The fact of the matter is that this rule, Rule 1304.2, is really being pushed forward by a single power plant developer. And as staff acknowledges, There are sources of air pollution like this fossil fuel power plant can seek the market in order to meet its emissions reductions needs. Therefore, the question before this board is actually a policy question. And that question is, should this board intervene to ensure that emissions reductions credits are available at less cost and more easily than they would otherwise be on the open market? Answering this question as yes is at very best a missed opportunity to make sure we're cleaning up our air. That'll cost us dearly in terms of health and in terms of money. At its worst, this rule is another example of how the fossil fuel industry manipulates policy to its benefit and to the detriment of the rest of us.
Mr. Chair, if I may, two things, Angela. One, could you just take a second to explain exactly what these two rules would do, 1304.2 and 1304.3? But also, you've told me about what happened with the procurement, and I would like you to explain so that I understand, make sure I understand and my colleagues understand what happened with that procurement process.
Yes, Dr. Liu, I will. So Rule 1304.2 and 3 are a companion set of rules that are being written in order to allow fossil fuel power plant developers to access the district's bank of emissions reductions credits. Those credits are required by the Federal Clean Air Act, and staff has asserted that they're not available, easily available and cheaply available on the market. So here, the purpose of the rule is to intervene in the market in order to make sure that ERCs are cheap and available. So it acts as a subsidy to fossil fuel power plant developers. And on your question about the procurement, it's really it's really very straightforward. So the PUC is responsible for determining what energy is needed in the region in order to ensure that we are safe and there's available energy. The PUC looked at the question of what needed to happen in order to address San Onofre shutdown and in order to address the once-through cooling plants going offline. They've already decided that. That came to a close in 2015. All of that has been identified, and there's not any uncertainty looking forward as is suggested in the staff's report. And what they found was there was a need to acquire 1,000 megawatts of fossil energy in the basin. Southern California Edison came back and decided that it was going to place 1,300 megawatts of fossil fuel power plants in this basin. That's more than the PUC said that we needed, and in fact is more than we can accommodate here.
Sorry, which, the 1,300 was made up of 3 power plants?
Yes, so the 1,300 megawatts is made up of 3 power plants: Huntington, Alamitos, and the Stanton Energy Center. Now, Huntington and Alamitos are able to get ERCs because they're repowers, right? And that's a different conversation for a different day, but we certainly recognize that building cleaner, rebuilding the existing fossil so that it's cleaner can have benefits. Stanton, on the other hand, is an entirely new power plant. That power plant is not currently existing and currently not emitting in the region. And in fact, Stanton is in Orange County, and interestingly, because of the blowout at Aliso Canyon, the CEC ordered a more quick deployment of storage, and in the same Orange County area, there was recently 125 megawatts of storage added, which in effect supplants the need for Stanton. So again, we're looking back instead of looking forward. I try. Thank you.
There was a very good discussion in committee, and Vice Chair Benoit directed us to look into the potential alternatives that we're currently faced with, one which was either granting the credits or denying the project. We think that there are certain limitations that can be made. I'm going to ask Dr. Fine to elaborate on that as his staff is looking at what those recommendations may be. But it's our intent to bring that back to committee for further consideration.
So thank you. Philip Fine, Deputy Executive Officer, Planning and Rules, SCAQMD. Staff does not disagree with the facts as Ms. Johnson-Mazzaros changed since 2 or 3 years ago when the Songs plant went down, and the thought was that there was going to be a dire need for new generation in the basin. So staff has recognized that that did not materialize to the extent that people had anticipated. So we brought this information to the committee a couple months ago and looked for committee direction, and committee direction was to move forward with what we had scheduled on our rule calendar and have been working on for 2 years. But as was mentioned, Vice Chair Benoit said maybe we can look at an alternative that just limited the access to these credits, very short term and a very small amount of credits just for the current projects. And staff is looking at ways to do that, but what we intend to bring forward, now it will be next June, so we do have some time to work on this, is the option to grant credits going forward under very limited circumstances. Staff's intent is to build safeguards into the rule that would only allow access to these credits as a last resort, meaning they have gone, there's no credits on the open market, there is they have been deemed absolutely necessary to build these plants through a public process at the CEC or at a local municipality. But the board will have the choice going forward. What we intend to bring forward is either moving forward with the rule as allowing access going forward under limited circumstances, limiting it even more to a short time period or a small amount of credits to accommodate just the current procurement, but then that would sunset and going forward, it would go back to the status quo, or the board can decide not to move forward with any new rules.
Who makes the determination that it's kicked into effect?
So the rule includes, the safeguards in the rule are that through the CEC and PUC process of identifying the need for new power plants, if it is determined through that public process that the need for the new power plant exists, then that is a signal that they would have access to our credits if they made a good faith attempt to acquire ERCs on the open market and could not find them, and they would have to make that demonstration. That's the draft rule as it exists today, but again, we have another 7 or 8 months to refine that. And then in the case of a municipality, they go through their own public process, like an integrated resource planning process that would also determine that, yes, it's absolutely needed to keep the grid stable and to keep the lights on, that we need new power generation. So we're pointing to those processes as a safeguard to allowing access to our internal bank. But again, the information has changed from a couple years ago where there was a lot of pressure to be able to allow siting of new power plants due to the loss of generation at Songs and the ones through cooling, and due to advances in energy storage, due to conservation that has occurred since, that demand has diminished dramatically, and that's acknowledged by all the stakeholders.
I'll let Dr. Liu say this, but I'm sure what he's going to say. I'm not sure. Here's what I would say if I were you. I wouldn't let any credits if this is truly an exceptional case, emergency, whatever, however you want to define it in the future. If credit were to be allowed, and I'm not sure I'm in favor of even that, but I remember the issue about which you speak a couple of years ago when we thought they were headed towards brownouts in the summer or maybe even blackouts. But if it was going to be an emergency situation,
That's another option that we have thought about and discussed, at least briefly in some of the working groups, is that a rule could be crafted to set up the structure, but the final approval of any access to the credits would have to require another board decision.
You know, it's kind of frightening. That's pretty darn close to what I was going to say. What I was going to say is that the CEC and the PUC, they don't care if those emissions are happening within our basin or not. What we care about is if those emissions are happening within our basin, where we're responsible for cleaning up the air and not allowing more pollution. So instead of taking affirmative action to allow pollution to happen that's not happening now, I think one of the criteria that we need as a board to judge is whether or not that generation could happen some other way or some other place. And that some other place is not going to be judged by CEC or PUC. So at this time, we're behind on finishing the AQMP. We're years behind on dealing with a metal grinding facility toxics rule to deal with problems we know about. They're still ongoing in Orange County. And we have other high priorities. I don't see why we're spending time and effort on developing this rule when we haven't done those other things yet. I would think that we would be better off focusing on those other more important items before we turn the resources and time over to doing this. Thank you.
Dr. Liu, I could just add that, as Dr. Fine said, a whole variety of options. We are focusing our resources on finalizing the AQMP and moving forward in those other rules. So I want you to be assured that we're not diverting our attention to where we need to focus on that. In this particular item, it went before committee. This was being pulled back at the request of the Vice Chairman, and we're continuing to move forward. And we appreciate all of the comments, and we understand those comments. You make excellent points, and we'll make sure that we take that into account as we bring recommendations before you.
In your chair, Sean. Yeah, you got to bring your own. We're gonna try to make room for you. With that, I'd like to move the item. I move approval of the Stationary Source Committee minutes. I mean, my opinion, I think I've gotten on the record. I think the minutes are probably accurate.
Mr. Chairman, we still need a motion on the board calendar, items 25 through 31.
So moved.
Second.
Any opposition? Moving on to 32.
All right, good morning, members of the board. My name is Philip Fine. I'm the Deputy Executive Officer at the South Coast AQMD, and that was a nice air quality management plan. And as Mr. Nastri mentioned, I can assure you that staff resources are directed very heavily in this direction. As you're all aware, we released a draft of our air quality management plan back in June, revised draft sometime today. And I wanted to provide a little bit of background of where we are, the challenges we face, the comments we've received on the draft plan over the last couple months, the responses and the revisions that we have made to the document, again, that will be released today, and then talk a little bit about schedule. I get the next slide. I'm not sure this is working. So as you know, and we've discussed this before, our region faces significant challenges when it comes to meeting the national ambient air quality standards. About 88% of the emissions in our basin, the NOx emissions that form PM 2.5 and ozone, come from mobile sources. Only 12% come from the stationary sources for which we have primary authority, and our authority over mobile sources is limited and difficult. And there are significant consequences of not achieving the needed emission reductions. We have the health impacts that our residents will be facing, including lost work days, premature death, lost school days, and the list it grows every day with new health studies. And then there's the economic consequences if we don't meet the standards. There's the loss of the federal highway funding, there's the difficulty for bringing new businesses in the area, but there's also the possibility that the federal government will come in with their own measures under a federal implementation plan that will have economic consequences not just for our businesses but for all of us. Because those plans can be quite draconian. They may include things such as no drive days for certain types of vehicles or half the vehicles, and those measures are something that we will not be part of the same type of open, transparent public process that we strive for here at South Coast. So next slide. So just again, by way of background of what we're trying to do, and what we were trying to do in the June version of the AQMP. We need significant emission reductions. We need over 40% by 2023 and over 50% by 2031 NOx reductions. So what this chart I'm showing shows is the needed reductions for attainment. We need about, from the year of 2012, which is our base year in our AQMP, we need about 400 tons per day reductions of NOx, and by 2031 we need a little bit more than that. And from 2012. And you can see here from existing rules and regulations that have already been adopted at the federal level, at the state level, and at the local level on our stationary sources, about 70% of those needed reductions come from these already adopted regulations. And like every air quality management plan and SIP that we update every 3 or 4 years, we added on top of that new state and local regulations based on where technology and feasibility has advanced over the last 3 or 4 years. So while it's a thin slice up there, it is very consistent with what we've done in past plans when we've been able to develop new measures based on what we now know. All the things we knew before, 3 or 4 years prior in the last plan, were already included in past plans and have since been adopted into regulation. You can also see the large fraction of federal sources for which we have even less control in the state. And then you could see that what we're talking about in terms of incentivizing the turnover to cleaner vehicles and cleaner equipment, that makes up the balance. So it's not all an incentive-based plan. The plan includes all these previous reductions that have been adopted in the rules and regulations, about 70% of which will lead to some significant reductions in the future. But it does not get us to attainment. When you look to 2031, you could see that we have more state and local regulations, less relative reliance on incentives, but it's still, we need those incentives to fill the gap. So 70% of those reductions actually come from regulations. We added the regulations where they were feasible. But when we released the draft in June, we asked for comments. We said it was a draft only. We asked for comments and ideas, even new ideas for regulations that we may not have included in the draft. And we got comments, as you can imagine. 67 comment letters, testimony at a wide range of working groups, stakeholder meetings, other public meetings, and we listened. And the draft now includes a lot of significant changes in response to those comments. Now, I'm just going to summarize the comments first, and then I'll get in a little bit to what we're doing in the revised draft. So in terms of comments, we had support for the incentive-based approach that I mentioned, but also some comments that said, wait, you left some regulatory actions on the table. We need a more regulatory plan. We heard healthy skepticism about the ability to raise the funds needed to fund the incentives, asking for a funding action plan, which, as you know, we're working on, and what happens if we can't raise the funding? What do we do if we have a shortfall? Strong support for making sure that the state and federal government do their fair share for the sources under their direct jurisdiction. Comments that wanted to push our measures and technologies towards zero emissions rather than, say, low NOx or ultra low NOx or near zero emission technology. And then comments also that we should be, as we have been in the past, technology neutral and fuel neutral. There's a wide range of other comments on the facility-based measures, concerns with setting indirect source rules, concerns with the caps and targets and fees. And then we also had strong support for indirect source rules, fleet rules, and moving directly towards regulation in the near term. And we had a wide range of other comments on specific details. So again, these are the major revisions to the draft plan. So I wanted to start with some of the new regulatory actions that we are including. So for large industrial sources, we'll start there. That is our largest facilities, most of which are under the Reclaim program. We had proposed, even back in June, an additional 35% reduction in NOx emissions from those 270 largest facilities by the year 2031. We've retained that target and that commitment, but what we have also done is highlighted one of the potential methods for getting to that 5 tons per day. And one of the potential methods is actually looking at the program very carefully and seeing if it has if it still has the benefits that it originally had when it was first adopted over 20 years ago, and potentially looking at sunsetting the program to a more command and control regime. And that has been discussed at our working groups, that has been discussed with some of our stakeholders, and we feel like there's a lot more discussion to be had there. But we have emphasized that in that measure, and that is something we will be starting very soon after the adoption of this plan and looking very seriously at moving that to command and control. In addition to that, we have to look at our other industrial sources, the sources that aren't in Reclaim. So we got comments that one potential area we should really be looking at are diesel backup generators. There's a whole wide array of diesel backup generators out there. They aren't used that often. They're actually tested more than they're actually used. But just that testing is a significant emissions in our basin, about 2 tons per backup diesel generator, that you have to make the case that there's nothing else out there that's going to serve your needs. There's been a lot of advances in battery backup storage, fuel cell technology, even some cleaner fuels if you had to go there. Fully recognizing that a hospital, emergency communications, wastewater treatment, they may need backup power for 2-3 weeks if the power goes out. They may need to retain that ability to run that long and have fuel delivered. Other applications where you just need a backup power for 15 minutes, 30 minutes for safety reasons, or powering down your servers, I think there's some opportunities there. So we anticipate an analysis and a longer term regulatory measure to try to move away from that. And we can use incentives to help change out some of the existing diesel backup generators where it's feasible. So again, we've added these regulatory measures. It still doesn't get us to attainment. As you know, if all the stationary sources went to 0, we would still not be at attainment, but we still have to look everywhere. So we also looked at residential and commercial appliances. We got comments that there's zero emission technology out there. There's solar hot water heating. There's other zero emission technology. So we added an anticipation of regulations that would look at where cost effective and feasible, that we can look at that require that zero emission technology in terms of the sale of new equipment. And we're not feasible or cost effective or affordable, then we'll have to look at near zero. And we do think that there are some new opportunities for even lower NOx emitting appliances and equipment in commercial and residential applications. So again, that's another area where we added a regulatory element that had previously been primarily incentives, and even though it's regulatory, incentives will still play a role in advancing that deployment as we go forward. So in addition, we added on the local mobile source measures, and these are the fleet rules or the facility-based measures. We were asked and added a lot of specificity and certainty to those measures. We're talking about the potential for newer expanded fleet rules that are within our SCAQMD authority under state statute, and looking at how we can reduce emissions from those public fleets. For the facility-based measures, we wanted to be more specific than we were in the draft, again, based on comments. So we've added specific timelines for that public process of developing those measures, that we will report back to the board in 6 months and a year with recommendations to see whether the process that we laid out previously, which was a collaborative process to potentially identify some voluntary actions that could be enforceable going forward. If that process is not yielding results, we will come back to the board within 12 months at the latest to recommend a potential shift and pivot into full regulation. So that's another addition to those measures. So these changes that we've made are significant. They identified another 2 tons per day of reductions by 2031, but they are not nearly enough, as you can imagine. We still need state and federal actions on regulations, and we still need state and federal actions on funding. So rather than just wait for the state and the US EPA to take those actions, which we could do, we could put everything in the black box, we're not just waiting. It's too important to sit back and wait for everyone else to do their fair share. So what are we doing? We're actively involved in the state SIP strategy in order to get emission reductions under their authority. A draft is out right now, and we continue discussing potential opportunities with them. You're aware of the petition. It looks like it's going to be a successful petition to US EPA to get the 90% cleaner 0.02 standard on heavy-duty trucks. Successful meaning that they're going to move forward with rulemaking. And for the first time in this plan, we have specified pathways to attainment and have specified how much it would cost to get there. And so that is going a long way towards starting the discussion towards what we need from our state and federal partners. So overall, we have a tremendous challenge. We're being open and honest about what it's going to take to clean the air. We're committed to include in this plan and going forward all feasible regulatory actions, and as we still have the public process going forward and as new ideas emerge, we can still have time to include them in the plan. But our analysis continues to tell us that incentives are really the most effective path, cost-effective path, and necessary path in the near term to reach our near-term attainment standards. And as rules are developed in the midterm and long term, those will help implement our incentive programs. So we continue to assess those potential funding sources for incentives, and as you know, we'll be bringing an action plan forward in the coming weeks. So finally, I wanted to talk a little bit about schedule. As I mentioned, we're releasing the draft plan today, this afternoon, and staff is still, according to the schedule that's been provided to everyone, is still working hard towards a December hearing. We have regional public hearings scheduled for the month of November, and then early December would be the hearing. But we also committed early in the process that we wanted to provide sufficient time for public review and comment. And we have a wide range of comments from a wide range of stakeholders that have been asking for more time. There are still a couple chapters of our socioeconomic assessment and running that model that have not yet been released. So we understand the concern there. So what we'd like to get some feedback today is on a possible delay of board consideration until February, which would allow us to get all the documents out, have another 45 to 60-day comment period on the AQMP before we put together that third draft, which will likely be the draft that the board would consider. In speaking in terms of timing to CARB and EPA, there's no major implications in terms of a 60-day delay. The reason we're talking about 60 days is 30 days from December puts us into January, but with the holidays, we don't want to ruin everyone's holidays with having to read another 1,000 pages of the plan. So we'd probably be looking at February. So with that, I'll conclude the presentation. Happy to address any questions.
Thank you. A number of us spent days in Washington, D.C. not long ago on the petition for EPA, and your comment was news to me. I'd like to hear a little bit more. I mean, your presentation case that without the help of the federal government of diesel trucks, so we really need the federal government to step up to the plate to get those pieces that are still there that reasonably we can attain. We spent a lot of time trying to get EPA interested in beginning a rulemaking process. Could you give us a little more background on what the status of that is, Mr. Nastry or Mr. Fine?
Yes, Supervisor, let me go ahead and take a crack at that. So with regards to EPA, as you recall, when we were in DC, EPA's priority was on finalizing the Phase 2 greenhouse gas rule, and that was finalized. What EPA did within the finalization was, in essence, quote our arguments on the need for further NOx reductions. EPA has subsequently signaled that they'd like to perhaps move forward, but they want to engage with some of the petitioners. So right now we're actually in the process of arranging a conference call with the signatories to the petition to talk with EPA. There are a number of challenges that we still face moving forward. One of the two primary asks was, one was begin the petition, and then two, make sure that it started before the end of November. We believe that they're going to move forward in the rulemaking process. It may not be exactly according to our request, but the fact that they would move forward in the rulemaking and possibly considering all of the information that's been provided, we would be confident where they would ultimately end up. And so our big concern, and I had a chance to talk with the National Association of Clean Air Agencies, which also includes many members of the Northeast states, NESCOM, that we also had with us, and MECA, the manufacturers of emission control. So we'll be talking to EPA, I want to say, within the next couple of weeks. And I think at that point we'll have much better confidence in terms of, hopefully, when EPA intends to start. I also intend to talk with EPA's Assistant Administrator for the Office of Air and Radiation, and again convey our desire, our being all of the petitioners, desire to move forward as expeditiously as possible.
Have the petitioners grown in number?
Yes. They continue to grow. We continue to get support across a wide variety of stakeholders.
And given all of that, I would also mention that I support the February date.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, may I comment? On the low NOx issue, ARB announced 2 days ago that they will conduct a workshop at SCAQMD on November 3rd to discuss potential changes to the heavy-duty engine emission standards, the warranties, and related heavy-duty programs. So this was on the agenda for ARB to begin the work in 2017. That was part of the mobile source strategy. I'm very glad to see that they're moving ahead with it now, because it coincides pretty well with what we're trying to do in Washington. And Washington, as you know, when we were there, asked us, what is ARB's position on this? And we related that they would move forward on it in 2017, but they're moving forward with it now, which I think is a very good sign. So this is really essential to our mobile source strategy. As you can see from those graphs, 88% of the emissions are mobile sources. Much of that is from heavy-duty diesel trucks. And with the low NOx standard, we will be able to get there. We see a clear path to get there. So I'm very pleased that ARB is moving forward with that. A couple of questions on the diesel backup generators. This has been a big problem in our district. I mean, it's a fairly substantial source of emissions from stationary sources. And my question is, do we have any incentives to find alternatives to diesel backup?
I mean, we
New
haven't...
technologies is what I'm thinking. And you mentioned, I mean, battery doesn't operate long enough. Some of these you may have to use a backup generator for a week or longer, and your battery won't do it yet, but what are we looking at?
So in those applications, unless we can identify some, even if you did need 3 or 4 weeks of power, is you could be using renewable diesel for your testing, right? And it's pretty much the same, but it's at least the GHG emissions are low, and there may be some air quality benefits. So if you do need a diesel generator, because you do need the ability to deliver fuel over a longer period of time, then we would recognize that. But we do also think that in some commercial applications, a large commercial building or a building like AQMD's headquarters, for instance. I mean, if we had, 30 minutes of backup power, an hour of backup power, where we could power down the servers, have that emergency, in that emergency situation, you may not have that diesel backup generator. And in terms of incentives, we haven't put a lot of incentives in this area yet, but it is part of our incentive program. It's something we would definitely look at, especially if we are working on a future regulation that might require it. One of the things that the incentives do is allow us to test the technology, gain public acceptance of the technology, and then start that deployment early. So there's some opportunities here. It's a little bit longer term. We need to do a technology assessment, but I definitely think there's applications where either battery backup, potential fuel cell, or even some cleaner fuels might actually help. And in terms of a battery backup, I mean, just these facilities have to permit those generators. They have to test those generators. There's costs associated with that. If we look at the pros and cons of going to some alternative, it may pencil out, or maybe a little bit of incentives will help it pencil out.
So I remember doing a trip to Honda where they had a whole array of fuel cell, and that was powered by natural gas piped in from Texas, renewable. But I mean, I'm wondering if that kind of technology could be looked at as well.
I think fuel cell technology is the other one we're looking at. If it's using natural gas that's coming out of the pipeline, you got to be concerned if that pipeline is disrupted during an emergency. But there may be some opportunities for on-site storage of liquefied natural gas or something in case of an emergency. So these are things that we need to do the assessment and look at.
So that's the final comment on that is, well, let's get going on that to see what we might be able to find,
exactly.
Establish some kind of incentive programs or technology assessment, as you mentioned, so we can move forward with a source that we can target.
Absolutely.
Can I have one more comment to that?
Yeah.
One of the things that I didn't hear you mention is, you really don't need a huge battery pack if you can get through the day or through the nighttime and then use your solar to recharge your battery pack. So I think another incentive we ought to look at is somehow incentivizing these businesses that are putting solar on their property. They're doing it just for the daytime, send to the grid and then bring it back. But maybe all we need to be doing is helping them fund and helping them get the technology to also put in a battery pack, which most of these businesses already have in their computer network room. And most of them are only there for, like you said, a couple hours. But if you just expand that battery pack a little bit longer and get the solar to be able to also operate where it can charge those battery packs during the day, you could have a good 2 to 3 week plan for just powering your computers if that's what you really need, or the cell phone tower, or those other things. So I think that's another piece of the technology that we ought to be talking about. And there are larger battery packs coming on the market now, and if we can encourage that somehow into businesses as opposed to a generator, I think that's a big win.
Absolutely.
And then okay, just another comment to that is there are some pretty good battery storage appliances out there too, as we've seen Tesla develop some of those, but other companies probably also, which are fairly low cost.
Yeah.
And if you power them with clean power, you have a pretty good solution, actually. It could be solar, and that's obviously what
solar
Tesla
gives you that long-term solution,
right, and then,
for off-site
yeah,
power.
you could put 2 or 3 of these in place. They're small, they can fit inside a building or outside a building, and so that's another way. Go ahead.
So just
Phil,
to
you wanted
add,
comment.
the other thing that at least a battery backup storage will save that business money, because they can do peak demand shaving. And a lot of their electricity charges are based on their highest 15 minutes of power draw. And if you could shave that, as many are doing already, to a lower level, you could save quite a bit of money on your power costs.
So it makes economic sense for them too. Let me mention another thing and see whether you factored this into our plans. There is a requirement out there that all new residential construction be zero net energy by 2020, and that commercial construction will follow that in a few years later. So how does that play into reaching our attainment goals? Have we looked at that or talked about it?
Yeah, so it's a little complicated how that's being implemented, and it's actually still being implemented. They're still working on kind of the guidelines for how they define what net zero is. Currently, my understanding, and we've just kind of started digging into this because of the measure we developed, it's really based on kind of the electricity kind of supply demand, even cost is in there a little bit when it's about net zero energy. What we would like to see is some kind of, at a minimum, some kind of carbon pricing or taking CO2 emissions into account, which isn't currently done, and then also try to insert criteria pollutant emissions into this definition of net zero. Because it's not just about net zero energy consumption, however you define it, and do some trading, and that's how it's kind of done now. It's about really being zero emissions is the most important part. So we've committed, actually in the measure, we committed to get much more involved in that process with the CEC, and we've already met with folks that have been part of that to try to integrate some of our needs into that process.
Okay, now one other point. You mentioned that the emission reductions that we might seek from facility-based regulations, you're putting that on like a 6-month to 1-year sort of path, and I'm wondering, is that going to be a backup part of our regulations, or how are we dealing with that? If we're not going to put it in now, we're going to like, I'm just wondering how you're going to put that in the plan.
The idea is to bring, just like we would for rulemaking, to bring all the stakeholders together to discuss potential actions that could be taken in terms of reducing emissions at those types of facilities, and trying to find mechanisms by which they would be all the things that EPA needs to take credit for those emission reductions, permanent, surplus, enforceable. And we hope to work with those facilities to come up with those practices and actions and mechanisms in order to do that. But if it's not going well, if the discussions aren't going well, if we're not identifying any other mechanism other than regulation that's going to work, then what we intend to do is report back to the board, put ourselves on the clock, report back to the board about progress, and at least within a year come back with recommendations to say, hey, we're close, it's working, these are the emission reductions we think we can achieve, maybe in this sector it's going well, maybe in another sector it's not going well, and then be able to shift that process, which is really the same as a rulemaking process, to moving towards a regulatory approach, which would be exercising our indirect source authority. So we would start the process, hopefully bring everyone together and look at what the alternatives are, but put ourselves on the clock to come report back to the board on progress and direction.
So it won't be specifically a part of our AQMP. How will it be integrated into the AQMP?
Well, what the state has done, what the Air Resources Board has done, is actually make the commitments to reduce emissions to the extent needed to reduce emissions from mobile sources and meet attainment. They're calling these further deployment of advanced technology measures. And there's many ways that they list, there's 4 different ways they list that could be achieved. Incentives is probably the big one that everyone's been talking about. But they're also talking about future regulations. As technology advances, they can do future regulations. And then looking at other things like intelligent transportation and operational efficiency. So this is our 5th leg of the stool. This is our way of using whatever authority we have or whatever ability we have to work with these facilities to also bring about those emission reductions using these mechanisms.
So back to my question, will there actually be language in the AQMP that spells this out, or how is that handled?
The language says we will, as it was before, it said we will collaborate, we will bring people together, we'll try to identify actions. But now what we have added is a specific timeline and schedule to report back to the board with recommendations from staff that may include a quick shift to a regulatory approach, depending on progress.
And then one thing that you wanted some feedback on was extending the time to present this to February. And my comment on that is, as long as ARB and EPA are okay with that, I'm okay with that. All right, that's all that I have for now.
We have some public comment on this item, but I would like to say before you leave the microphone that from from my communications with both the environmental community and the business community, the February 4th date seems totally logical, because everybody's going to need time to look at this document, because it's probably the most important document that we've produced in a decade or two. So unless I have overwhelming date, then February's okay. The other thing I would like to say is, before we take the testimony, is that I'm heartened by the basket approach to the AQMP that you're now advocating, because I think it provides us with more tools to use to reach our goals, but it also gives the public a understanding that we know that we can have the various tools to use to reach the goals that are necessary. So I think it was a very good move, Mr. Executive Director, for the staff to move in this direction. I think for public perception as well as practical implementation, it gives you the kind of latitude I think that at the end of the day you're going to need. Thank you, Doctor.
Mr. Chairman, I just have one
Sure.
question. I wanted to understand a little bit more about diesel generators. I'm fairly new to the board, as you know. Serve on the technology committee. I don't think that we've ever talked about diesel generation manufacturers and any new technology there, but I'm sure it's very discouraging for all of us to hear that sounds like we have about 700 tons per year of NOx emissions just from testing. And I'm wondering if there's any technological advancements that are occurring in that industry to try to reduce the amount of time that it takes to actually test one of these generators. Anything that we're doing.
That's something we could definitely look at as part of moving forward with that measure.
Okay, thank you.
I'm doing great. Good morning. I wanted to come this morning. First of all, I'm very pleased that all of you came to Riverside. We sometimes think we get ignored an awful lot. I'm sorry?
There you go. Start over again.
It's going to buzz, is what I'm trying to avoid. I'm glad that you came to Riverside. I'm glad that you took a tour of CSERT. It's really a jewel in our area. And I know that when you take the tours, it really makes things real to you. You internalize what you see. So I'd like to also encourage you as a board to take a tour of the communities that are most heavily impacted by the decisions and the inactions that you take. That would make it really real to you, to actually see what people are dealing with and to talk with them. We were a little dismayed to see the AQMP that came out heavily, we believe, focused on incentives. It may be a basket, but that we really bring together some hard-hitting things. You have gone to EPA and you have stated that this is a state of emergency. We have nearly 6,000 people a year dying. If this were the Zika virus, we would have everybody and his brother down here taking actions, very strong actions to correct this. And yet we're not. We're taking very mild ones. I know the stationary sources are getting hit hard. The major sources are our transportation. And we've got to do something. For years, we have been lobbying, trying to get an indirect source rule put in place, and it still is not there. We need to do something. I think that one of the things we could do is to identify those hard-hit communities, target them, treat them as a state of emergency, and put in place some emergency actions. Some things that in that area, you have to use zero-emission technology, period. That if you're in that area, you can't bring more pollution in here. We've got to start doing that. We have to deal with some of the new facilities that are proposed to come to the region. We can't meet the standard currently. How can we do that if we keep adding more and more? And warehousing is primary for what is coming into our region. I understand that the ports and the industry sees that as necessary, but we can't afford to put up with that kind of pollution. We have to do something. That the district joined with us in challenging the World Logistics Center, and I hope that you'll continue that challenge. Bringing 15,000 trucks a day onto the 60 going through Miraloma, where you have the highest levels, is unconscionable. You will never be able to reach your standard if we have facilities like that continuing. So we've got to stand strong. We're willing to work with you, but you have to stand up and really show to us and demonstrate to us that you're here to protect us, that you're really here to keep another 6,000 people from dying. Thanks.
Mary Valdemar, are you here?
Hello, my name is Mary Valdemar. I'm a resident of San Bernardino. I just wanted to also echo Penny's words in thanking you for coming to the Inland Empire today, where this is an issue that really hits home for us. I also wish that this could be more in the community, like the Mission Inn is kind of an echelons here in the Inland Empire, and we really need this conversation to come to the real community, which is, you know, we have a lot of areas that are deeply impacted by the decisions that you all are making, and we need more of those voices to be heard in the process. As folks were kind of discussing, try to figure out the bureaucracy here to be able to speak, I hear a lot of people like kind of discouraging, and I just want to point out that to get the youth to come someplace like this on a Friday, you know, is really difficult. So that demonstrates their passion and commitment to working both with you and also holding you accountable to make sure that we have a really strong AQMP plan. We all want that goal. We want a strong plan that is very regulatory and not just asking for folks to volunteer to clean up the air. We need, you know, we're past the point of asking people nicely to please do this when they've exhibited a long time not being willing to do this. So I really just want to ask you, on behalf of many community members who couldn't be here today, I'm on my lunch break, and usually I can't take my lunch break down to Diamond Bar, right, and back here to the Inland Empire in order to have a few words in front of you. So I represent a lot of working families, a lot of people of color in this community, a lot of people working 3 jobs, going to school, and really struggling just to survive. And when our survival is put at risk by having a reclaim program that doesn't really work, we need to like really strengthen that and not just hold you accountable, but hold the real people who are contributing to us continuing to not meet the standards that we need to meet. And so that for us, a lot of us, that's logistics industry, that's a lot of these folks that, as Penny said, it's unconscionable that it could continue to just be added and added to the problem. We need to stop those new projects until we can get to a place where, thank you.
Hold the applause. Hold the applause. Mr. Valdemar has a good idea. I'd like to see us do some hearings here in this area, throughout the area. And let Supervisor Benoit and Supervisor Rutherford tell us where we need to be. And go into the communities and hold some hearings at night so that people don't have to take off their job. So let's get that done. Thank you, Ms. Valdemar. That's the conclusion of our testimony on 30.
Mr. Chair, I had a
Just comment also.
I had a question for staff.
Sure.
I asked staff some questions about what's going on with port emissions, and the answers I got back, in all honesty, I didn't have a whole lot of time to read them over. The number of times I would have had to read them over to see that they started making sense in my mind. So I'm going to try to ask some straightforward questions about that, because I think the approach this year is very different from what we did in 2012. And I just want to make sure I understand it before I pass judgment. My inkling is to pass judgment first, so I'm going to try to make sure I understand it. But in 2012, we took the Clean Air Action Plan commitments and we used them as our baseline emissions inventory data. And if I understand staff's comments back to me, this year we chucked that approach, and what we did is we threw their emissions in with everybody else's and put in these quote-unquote growth factors allowing for emission increases at the ports, and are no longer using those commitments as our baseline information, thereby no longer needing, in staff's estimation, a backstopping regulation to make sure that the port achieves those emissions. Now, in the end, I'm really hopeful that this doesn't make a difference, because I think that the ports can and will reduce emissions, but I want to make sure that they don't increase emissions, because I got a hold of this new cargo forecast that they have, and they estimate doubling container traffic in the next 18 years. And I look at what's going on now, and what happens at the port has an impact here in the Inland Empire, because those trucks end up out here. If we can clean up those trucks, that means the trucks out here will be cleaner, among other things. But I can't even fathom what it's going to be like with twice as many containers. So I'm concerned that there's going to be some slippage in the air quality gains that have happened. And so can you address some of those issues for me, please?
Good morning, Dr. Liu. Henry Hoga with staff. When we look back at the two backstop measures that are in the 2007 AQMP and the one in the 2012 AQMP, the one in the 2012 AQMP, IND-01, is specific to the 24-hour PM2.5 attainment in 2014. And the emissions inventories at that time calls for a certain percentage reduction from port-related sources. When we look at the emission inventories reported by the ports, which is generated through a process with the Air Resources Board and the AQMD, we see that they actually have reduced, the emissions have gone down to those targeted levels that we had envisioned in IND-01. So despite the fact the region did not attain the standard, they have seen emission reductions occur. And they have been seeing emission reductions occur over time. What's going to happen is that as future growth in port volume, container volume, the emissions will eventually level out and may increase because there will be no further regulatory actions on those port-related sources. But as we look forward in the 2016 AQMP, we do have new demographic information, new economic forecast information, which are provided to the port. SCAG develops the growth projections for the AQMP. So they're all worked into our projections of the future year baseline emissions for 2023 and for 2031. So with that growth, we look at, with the state, what emission reductions could occur over this time period. So we do recognize that growth as we move forward. And keep in mind that the inventories that we had in the previous AQMP are now outdated because we have new information. So we're starting, and that new baseline does reflect the growth in the port projections.
We're also going to have an updated Clean Air Action Plan. And my hope is that that Clean Air Action Plan isn't going to say they're going to increase their emissions. I'm pretty sure it's not. So I don't know why we put into our baseline higher numbers than they're projecting. It just doesn't make sense to me.
Our baseline emissions for the 5 port-related sources, on-road heavy-duty trucks, ocean-going vessels, harbor craft, cargo handling equipment, and locomotives, are built upon projections from ARB. And the port emissions are a subset for the most part. For example, the locomotives that go in and out of the ports represent about 30% of the total locomotive emissions that operate in the region. So we do have a subset of that. And ocean-going vessels, probably 100%. But they do have vessels that transit through our region, our waters, but do not stop at the ports. So the ports only report what goes in and out of the facility.
I mean, I've gone in enough detail for everyone else to have to listen to. But Wayne, I think, Henry and I should probably sit down and go through this in more detail, because I'm not sure I still understand the rationale. Okay?
We'll be more than happy to sit down with you.
If I could ask, we do have I believe, a ports subcommittee, do we not?
Yes.
Maybe the port subcommittee could sit down and work on this together. I think Joe would be interested in that.
That would be my recommendation before, that's why I pushed my button, but thank you, Judy, for making that recommendation, and I would second that. And at the time, I think this is a good opportunity for us to convene the port subcommittee. It's also an opportunity for us to recognize the work that's been done over the course of the last several years by the port. Would you agree, Henry, that you've seen a reduction of 80% of emissions of NOx and SOx in the port complex?
We've seen a significant amount of reductions. And I just want to mention we had a meeting, Mr. Nastri, Dr. Fine, and myself, with the ports on the status of the Clean Air Action Plan update. And they do provide additional emission reductions.
And just, colleagues, so you know that I meet regularly with Gene Soroka, our executive director of the Port of Los Angeles, most recently the last few days. So they have plans to have both commissions arrange a joint commission meeting to address the Clean Air Action Plan 3.0. So I appreciate, Dr. Liu, your continued advocacy and your push and your leadership. I'm looking forward to partnering with each and every one of you. This also gives us an opportunity to remind ourselves the importance of the SCIG project. In a time where we were able to look at multimodal and greening developing the most green rail yard facility in the country, completely because of litigation from this body and others, and also an opportunity to remove hundreds of thousands of trucks off our regional freeways and highways. Can you imagine today would have been built? So frustrations continue. A lot of work still needs to be done. I do know that both ports are working collectively to do everything they can to continue to reduce emissions, and also at a time today where you're seeing cargo volumes increase. So looking forward to continue to work with the leadership of both ports, and most importantly with the EJ community in the surrounding areas as well. Thank you.
As the chair of that committee, Councilman, can we count on you to put together a meeting?
Now's a good time. Thank you.
Of the appropriate people. Thank you. Thank you very much. Dr. Liu, do you have any further comments?
No, that was it. Mr. Chair, thanks. And I support your comments about, I'll go into 4 areas about the AQMP just very briefly. And number one, with the diesel backup generator, totally support Board Member Robinson's comments about working with the manufacturers to develop zero-emission technology, whether it's providing incentives, whatever the case is. I was just at a meeting in Supervisor Antonovich in my area in the San Gabriel Valley 2 weeks ago at a San Marino City Council meeting where over a dozen parents got up complaining about a diesel backup generator to school, which was within 20 feet. And I know we've taken, thank you, Wayne, and your staff for taking action. But it just shows the concern of schools throughout our district who are concerned about their kids, 5, 6, 7, sitting within 20 feet of this thing. And as Vice Chair told me, he was driving through the neighborhood the other day at 2 o'clock, and he just saw this plume of smoke, and they're testing one of these generators. So it's serious issues, so thanks. Secondly, in the area of the category of CMB, residential and commercial appliances, I totally agree. I think it's a balance of the regulatory and incentives. Let me give you an example I think all of us can relate to today. The two biggest issues in California are air and water. And you look at what we did with water when we had this, the drought, the 5th or 6 years going on. And what happened? We regulatory reduced the reduction. The governor comes out, state Water Resources Control Board, 20-30%. But what did LA County, the Metropolitan Water District, all the water districts do? They provided major incentives. So look what happened. We all reduced the water consumption, but there was turf removal programs, high efficiency washers, high efficiency toilets, controllers for your yards. I got to replace 2 toilets. But it made it, in all these programs, the money went out, hundreds of millions of dollars, and our city's re-implementing it because it was so successful. Why can't we do that with air too? You pose a regulatory, you start doing it in stages, reduce it, but provide people with incentives and money to buy these products. They're not going to go out and do it on their own. But if you say, I'll give you $100 off this toilet, they're going to do it. Super program. Number 3, I totally agree with the chairman to go to February, even March if we have to. It's like a city. Our city's reviewing our general plan like we do every 10 or 15 years. As all the elected officials here know, it's our vision for the future. And this is our vision for the 4-county future. So totally support a deliberate, thoughtful program for our staff to look at this, for all the stakeholders, environmental industry, local government, individuals, to digest all this information. It's massive. And 4th, I just hope, Phil, you look at the transportation aspect, as we just discussed it earlier, Supervisor Antonovich and myself, about the appropriate use of funds. LA County has a ballot measure in November, Measure M. It's over $120 billion. There's an incredible, I could say, reincarnation. It's a transformation in transportation is going on right now. That measure passes, you're going to see the entire system that was there in 1905 when Henry Huntington had a system that was the biggest in the world. I've seen maps of that system going from, it's the 4 counties. Look at the map of the system that Henry Huntington put in place for his Pacific Electric car that was by 1925 was the biggest system in the entire world. It was, what was it? It was the 4 counties. San Bernardino, Riverside, Orange County, and LA County, trains going everywhere. And then it was taken out. We're rebuilding that system now in LA County. You know, the other counties here are looking at extending that web of trains and buses and mass transit. So we've got a light rail, exactly. And we just saw the system open from Pasadena to Azusa, the Gold Line. And when I try to get on my bike on that train in the morning, this between 7:15 and 8:30, I have to beg people to move so I can push my bike on there and just get on the train. It's that successful. And the line to the beach, it's gone up 26% during the week and nearly 100% on the weekends. Because people are clamoring for getting transportation. So, Philip, if some way you can work this with these transportation companies, this is getting people, what you said, 87% is mobile sources. Well, when I see people, 80,000 people riding a Gold Line or 65,000 a day, that's 60,000 people off the streets, right, not in their cars. Yep. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
I think it's sad. I was having a conversation with a friend of mine last week, and it was just like Katya was saying, you know, water and air, but water is so far ahead of air that it's almost not in the same galaxy. And so what my friend said to me, which was very scary, was he said, air is going to need something like Flint, Michigan to put it on the national eye and to make government stand up and instead of just doing modicum steps, do something major to improve the air quality. I just hope that that isn't really true. I hope that it's hard. I've been here now 24 years, and no question, I've seen major improvement. But as I'm always saying, my speech is always the same. It's never fast enough, and it's never big enough. But somebody, somewhere, sometime, has got to sit down and say, this is a major concern. Water was a major concern, and air is a major concern. And we have to find large steps to move this needle so that we diminish the number of people who are affected by poor air quality. So I think you're right, Mr. Cacchiotti. It is the two main issues, but one is quantum leaps ahead of us is the problem. We don't need a vote on 32, do we? No, it's just an update. How about a report on the draft action plan to reduce the permit? This is 33.
33.
I have no speaker slips on this, but it's obviously very important to us.
Okay. And I recognize the time constraints, so I'll try to zip through the slides here, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, members of the board. As you all know, as an agency, we have been experiencing a fairly sizable permit backlog. And 3 months ago, when I assumed my new job, I was tasked to start working on it and reduce the backlog as expeditiously as possible. Rolled up the sleeves. We prepared a draft action plan that we are presenting today to you. And it reflects input from our rank and file all the way up to the management from our stakeholders. So it's a fairly comprehensive plan. 4 key objectives behind it. Eliminate the backlog expeditiously, issue the permits in a timely manner, and improve customer service and transparency. And we want to do all those while we are keeping the environment whole. So we shared with you 3 months ago approximately the open permit application aging status report, which stood at 7,300 roughly permit applications. We looked at this from a variety of different angles, by age, by type, for the sole purpose to better understand the magnitude of the problem, the difficulty of the problem, and figure out how to prioritize our resources. And at the end of the day, we were able to distill down this open permit application to true backlog versus working inventory, and the split was roughly 50-50. Obviously, we need to emphasize on the permit backlog, but we want to make sure that you all understand that we are not going to be ignoring the working inventory, because those reflect new permit application from a small business owner who is trying to open a permit, a dry cleaner or an auto body shop. So we are going to make sure that we don't work on the backlog at the expense of those permit applications. So we are going to be working on both fronts. There is a number of reasons why the backlog persists, the hurdles and bottlenecks. They are all in the stuff in the action plan that you can all read to. There are things that are beyond our control, regulatory hurdles. For instance, if we are dealing with large projects such as power plants, if the project requires CEQA, HRA modeling analysis, these are going to be very elongated time frames. But there are areas where we have control over, for instance, process inefficiencies on our computer systems, and our action plan does tackle and rely on those things that are beyond within our control. How big is the challenge? If you look at what we processed last year, 7,700 permits, roughly, which translates to 100 permit applications per engineer. If we want to eliminate the backlog within 1 year or 2 years, we'll have to improve our capacity, permit processing capacity, by 25 to 50%. And this is government, by the way. So the action plan that is before you today is actually trying to tackle both and analyze both targets. And we are going to be focusing on both increasing the permit processing capacity as well as the permit processing efficiency, because those two go hand in hand, and we view those as sides of the same coin. So we've got immediate action and longer-term measures. Just to give you a flavor of what those are, we are going to start with active management and supervision. We are going to be reducing the high vacancy rate that has been around 20 to 30% in the last few years that has contributed to this backlog. Better training. We plan to increase our work week beyond the 40 hours. We'll probably add in another 10 hours, so we are going to be working our staff and ourselves a lot harder than we did before. We are going to be looking at our outdated policies and rules, see whether we can do additional permit streamlining to our permitting, but more importantly, we are going to be investing heavily on automation. We want to develop templates, computer programs that our engineers will be able to use and be able to process those permits a lot faster than they do right now. And not only that, we want to make sure that we develop electronic online tools that not only our engineers, but even our applicants can use and get their permits online. Our friends in the Bay Area have already done it. They invested close to 10 years and millions of dollars developing that. I had the privilege with Supervisor Rutherford and Mr. Nastri to go visit them. So we want to do the same thing. They're willing to work with us. We want to do the same thing, and we'll see to what extent we can incorporate that program into our system, but we are not stopping there. We are going to be developing our own systems on a parallel fashion. We want to improve customer service and transparency. Everything that I talked about developing, we want to upload them on our website and make them available not just to our engineers, but also to our stakeholders, whether they're applicants, whether they're the public. We want to develop dashboards such as the one that you see on the screen that will be able to tell you or whoever else is interested in looking at us to determine how well we are doing in reducing the backlog. We want to develop online tracking systems where we allow the applicant or the public again to see where a particular application is on the system and eliminated that black hole concept that we've been dealing with. So we'll have multiple ad hoc teams. There are too many tasks in this action plan to work on a number of different tasks, and the oversight will be handled at the DEO, CO, and EO level. We have specific timelines and a couple of scenarios that I want to talk to you about. Our scenario one is our 2-year effort, which seeks to improve our efficiency by 25% and relies on efficiency measures, enhanced supervision and management, and it relies on our existing staff. No new staff, but we are going to be working a lot harder. The cost is $2.2 million, fairly reasonable for 2 years. And we think we can reduce everything by 100% by 2 years. In addition to this, we want to invest on the automation, which will cost us $1 million per year, we are estimating, for the next 5 years. It's roughly half the magnitude of what the Bay Area has invested. We think we can learn from their experience, from their successes, as well as mistakes, and we can shorten the time frame as well as the cost. We also ask the question, what if? Can we further accelerate this and eliminate the backlog in 1 year? And in theory, you can do it. We'll need to do everything that we have to do under scenario one, but because we have to deal with process additional applications, sizable number, we'll have to hire additional people on a temporary basis and on a permanent basis, and hence the reason why the cost escalates to $12 million. Unfortunately, with this scenario, because of the sizable number of people that we'll have to hire, it takes some time to hire them and train them, so we'll have slow first or 2 quarters, and it elongates the first year to 15 months. So we think the first scenario is by far the more reasonable one, and this is the feedback that we got also from the Station Resource Committee. If there are different viewpoints from the rest of the board members, we would like to hear those. So to conclude, this action plan is fairly aggressive, but very realistic and achievable. It is going to be a living document, so as we get fresh ideas, we are going to be including them and removing some of the ineffective one. And it's intended to be a roadmap. But the key thing, the message that I want to leave you with is that we must invest in automation to embrace the 21st century, and if you want to make some of the gains that I'm going to share with you sustainable. So we are going to be offering quarterly updates to the Station Source Committee, and this concludes the theory part of the presentation. So where are we today? Because we have been implementing this action plan for the last 2-3 months, and here is basically where we are. When we started, we were at slightly over than 7,300 open permit applications, and now we are 17.5% lower to slightly over than 6,000 permits. So we are very encouraged with the early results, and my deputy was reminding me that this is the lowest that we have been in the last decade and a half. And I'll stop there.
Yes. May I, Mr. Chair?
Sure.
Lockie, I think it's a great thing that we're looking at the technology. I'm glad we went to San Jose to see what they did and the idea of implementing what they're doing and bringing that to our systems. My fear is, and I heard this a little bit at Stationary Source, that the technology they're using is more cloud-based, it's a different system, we can't easily fit their cog into our wheel.
Yes.
I think it's because the entire wheel needs to be looked at.
Yes.
I think we need to do a systems-wide approach to this, not just invest $2 million in planning, but maybe we need to invest more in our entire system for all of our digital online systems to help us get out of the quagmire we're in, where we continue to try and add someone else's cog that doesn't fit into our wheel. And I don't want to slow this project down, but I do want to have someone from the outside, an outside consultant, come in, take a look at our infrastructure, and tell us if we're doing it right. Maybe we need to take everything out and we need to be on the cloud, or maybe that doesn't work for us, but we need to look and to move forward and not just add another piece to our continuing to be slower computer systems internally, but look towards having an outside solution. And at some point when Philip was talking about having to shut down the servers because there was a power outage, if we got everything on the cloud, just turn the lights off or turn the switches off because the lights are already out and go home. Because you can go home to your computer, maybe you still have power at home, and start working from there. We don't need to have the server racks at the air district permanently there all the time, 100%, if we move stuff towards the cloud and get away from the idea that we have to have our own physical setup there. And I really would like to have an outside consultant come in and take a look at that. I actually, area, that's part of what they do. They'll come in and do an IT audit from an outside perspective and give you a, hey, yeah, you're doing it right or you're doing it wrong, and here's where you can go or where you should or shouldn't go. And I firmly believe that rather than just spend another $5 million over the next 5 years or $10 million in this one department, that maybe we need to be spending a little bit more, but for the whole environment. So that's my comment I wanted to get back to you and to my colleagues. I think we need to take the time before we make this large investment in one department, that we ought to be looking at the entire whole.
Mr. Chairman, I agree with that. We have spent quite a bit of money in the last year just upgrading our computer system. I mean, and hopefully we can integrate this kind of a program in what we have already spent on that program.
And I think the message back from San Jose was, even though we've made that investment, it's still not as advanced as what they have, and therefore we couldn't just take the tool they had and bring it to ours, and that's my
right.
Word.
What you need is a good computer systems engineer to come in and look at this. Right. And let me say one more thing about the plans. You presented 2 different plans. Right. I have a concern about the fast track plan where you're training temporary people and then letting go. It's kind of a wasted asset if you train and then let them go. Right. So I'd be more in favor of a slower track where we train people, but then we retain them. They're part of our permanent staff.
They're all our existing staff, so we are not relying on hiring additional staff. So
and
whatever we do, the investment stays here.
Right, it seems we need additional staff for this. Let me ask, how many total permits does the district have out there?
Oh my God, we have 27,000 facilities, so probably we have close to 65, maybe 70,000 permits.
So that's a lot that
it's a
we're
lot.
Dealing with.
Yes.
Yeah, and 7,000 a year, is that the normal kind of application process we'd see, or is that a little bit high?
So it's average, 7,700. Clearly this year we are going to exceed that goal because we are working a little bit harder than the past. But last year we received 6,000 new permit applications, which was a little bit on the lower side. Normally, it will be 10-15% higher. And the size of that bar that you see is basically the difference of those two. So we are going to be very closely tracking both the inflows as well as the outflows.
Right. Well, I appreciated your report, and it was very thorough in explaining why there are delays, because there are a lot of reasons for the long delays in some of the applications.
Right.
But I think I wholeheartedly agree with Councilman Benoit on this issue, or Mayor Benoit. Councilman. That we ought to look at our computer system, have a systems engineer in here to review that, and hopefully, with the right kind of programs in place, we can reduce the staff burden on processing permit applications as well. So.
No, thank you for the feedback. And actually, Councilman Benoit's comments go even beyond the permit processing. You want us to look at the entire computer system that serves the rest of the agency. Great direction. Thank you.
Mr. Cacchiotti?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I support Vice Chair and Board Member Mitchell and Benoit's comments. Focusing on another aspect, my background's in Masters in Sports Administration and coaching units. I look at how we work staff or work players, or overwork staff or overwork players.
Right.
I like to look at numbers.
Yes.
Even where I work during the day at the Attorney General's, I look at cases that come in, how many attorneys. Kurt does. He's got a group of attorneys. You might have 100 cases. How many attorneys can handle this type of a case?
Right.
Your staff, how many, you said 7,000 applications. You said each had like 100 they process.
Right.
How many staff are working on applications? How many do they process?
Sure.
Get an idea.
Sure. And this is the 30,000-foot level, because not all applications are created equal, right?
Exactly.
Just
All
like your
cases
cases, right?
not equally.
So we had roughly 79 engineers, permit engineers, dedicated exclusively to permit processing. So we processed last year close to 77,000. It translates roughly to 100 permits per engineer. So we'll have to increase that by at least...
You said 7,000 or 77,000?
7,700.
7,700, okay.
100.
So give and take, it's roughly 100 permits per engineer, a little bit higher.
So give me explain how they process the permit. Just if you can just go with simply...
Oh, okay. It's a two-step process. And I'll be happy to spend time with you offline, perhaps. I think you are time-pressed. Yes.
Yeah.
It's a fairly elaborate process, but I'll be more than happy to spend some time.
So my concern is, as we do this, I support the first approach, of course. I don't want to burn out our staff. I hope we have adequate staff we pull in. I know we always talk about efficiency, and that just means you're overworking staff. I've been in so many agencies in state government for 20-some, 30-some years, almost 25 years now.
Yes.
And I've seen people, we're going to do this efficiency, that efficiency.
Right.
And then staff gets burnt out.
Yes.
And people, people leave or whatever. What can we do? We don't burn out staff, but we...
You are absolutely correct. We are very concerned about that aspect. In fact, we recognize that even in our action plan. Yeah. And at least what we have in mind, if we are going to go the OT route, the overtime route, that we are going to do it either every other week for up to 10 hours, or perhaps every other month, so that we can give a break to staff, because the burnout happens. It's inevitable. But the good news that I can share with you today is that what we have accomplished thus far, we spent nothing, no overtime yet. It is a hip pocket item that we are going to exercise once we slow down. We want to know what our new baseline is. There's a new management, new style, new approaches. So we want to know, where is our new baseline? Once we plateau, then we are going to start effectuating, the OT and the rest of the measures. So we are going to be using those sparingly, fully recognizing some of their negative ramifications, and we'll try to minimize those, obviously.
Supervisor?
Well, first of all, thank you for the discussion and the effort so far. I think it's been very helpful. I'm trying to remember, I think we've all complained somewhat about the things we hear about, the delays in permits, but I think Supervisor Nelson, Supervisor Antonovich, and maybe a few others, we got moving in this direction, and it was very helpful. And I think it'll have a good reflection on the organization in the long run.
so.
One concern I have is that you mentioned, for instance, a power plant application, and it's completely understandable that you apply to build a big power plant, you get a permit, and then you wait years to get, that permit is ready to be processed, but nothing can be done until they get the other myriad of things they got to do done and finally get moving. What I didn't find in the data, and there was a lot of data there and I appreciate it, is any kind of differentiation in numbers between, of the 7,000, do we got 1,000 power plants, and so it's reasonable that many of them will be years, or are there 7 power plants?
Right.
And are there 6,907, some that should have been done much quicker?
Right.
And the daunting task of just categorizing 7,000
Yes.
pending applications when all that's on paper, or most of it's being processed by paper, is huge, and I understand that.
Yes.
But at some point in the future, and as you develop the automation,
Yes.
I think you need to differentiate between those that are pending in the long term by someone else's decision or pending some other approval, and those that are simply sitting on somebody's desk for 6 months or a year because we don't have enough staff or time to get to them.
Excellent point. Thank you very much for bringing it up. You are correct. I was not able to give you that level of detail because our tracking system, our existing tracking system, has its limitations. This is as good as it gets. But we do plan to improve it. And rest assured, I'm asking staff to go through each and every folder of them and provide me that information, even manually. So in the future, maybe a month, 2 months later, I'll be able to tabulate those and provide you the information, the exact information that you're asking for. And yes, we don't have 1,000 power plants waiting in line. There are a handful of those, but it was just one example that I gave, you know.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. I'm pleased to see the progress that's being made, and I agree with Councilmember Benoit that we really need to take a look at the technology, and I think that's necessary that we do that. One question I have is how many engineering vacancies do we have?
Okay. We had quite a few. We had close to, 15, 20 of them, and slowly, and thanks to Mr. Nastreve's initiative, actually, we started filling those fairly rapidly. Our vacancy rates was between 22 to 25%. We are rapidly reducing down to 8%, which is our more traditional vacancy rate. The drawback is that even though we are getting the fresh blood in, it takes us 2 to 3 years to train them. The very first year,
I understand that.
you know,
That's why we need to aggressively bring those young people in now.
Sooner rather than later.
Because, as I understand it, our engineering workforce has been here a long time.
Right.
A lot of them are nearing retirement, maybe some already retired, and we need to train, get some fresh blood engineers in here, train them, and so that not only reduce this backlog, but keep the agency moving forward in the future.
I wholeheartedly agree with you.
It's worth the money to bring them on.
Yes.
And not train them temporarily and let them go. We need to train them and keep them.
I'll agree with you.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
We learned so much on our trip to the Bay Area AQMD about how to do this permitting process more effectively and use technology that's at our fingertips that we haven't yet incorporated. And we know that's going to take a while. It's not going to be instantaneous.
Right.
Even if we're able to hire young engineers, we're not going to have brand new software or apps up and running.
Right.
But equally important as the kind of technology that we bring to bear on this problem is the attitude that staff brings to bear on the permitting process.
Yes.
And I think what the Bay Area staff had to say about that was very, very critical, and I hope that in these plans we get to that point as well.
Yes.
And that is that they don't sweat the small stuff.
Yes.
If there are folks who are using the online applications that come to be developed, and they list that they've got these standard pieces of equipment, the Bay Area staff then doesn't spend time tinkering with each little modification or each different update of that equipment. There are some general parameters that are applied for the small folks, and they spend the bulk of their effort and thus our public resources on dealing with the bigger issues, the bigger polluters. So we need to make sure we have the right attitude going through this so that we can get to the low-hanging fruit that's out there on this backlog. Let's get them cleared, and then let's focus on getting our systems in place, our attitude in place, and get to the bigger stuff that's going to be harder. So I'm glad that we got to experience that together, and that they are so eager in the Bay Area to lend their expertise where they have had pitfalls to us to help us get through this quicker. But we're still going to have to be patient. It is going to take a while, but I very much appreciate your and Mr. Nastry's attention to this and getting us through the backlog. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Oh, yes, Mr. Supervisor Nelson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It appears I can use this mic. First and foremost, I think it's important to point out I am going on my 6th year here, but this whole presentation was not by accident, and it all stemmed from one basic inquiry, and I'm embarrassed I didn't ask it 6 years ago. I want to see the list, and I want to see the aging report. And of course, we were assured there was nothing to see, except that that wasn't true.
Right.
What has happened since, I just don't think that it's fair to let Mr. Nastry and Lackey finish this without a heartfelt thanks. You know, this should have been done a long time ago, but it's never too late to be smart. Both of you people stepped in with the same resources we've had that created the problem and did something different. We're willing to listen and solve a problem. And I just want you to know, from one board member's perspective, it's just greatly appreciated to prove that we just don't have to do things a certain way because we did them that way a year ago. And I just want to thank everyone for their comments, but you know, Supervisor Rutherford really makes a great point. When our neighbors in another district that share some similar aspects politically and diversity-wise, and they're, look at their focus. Don't worry about the little stuff. You know, we could find a fight to pick with everybody, and if that's the nature of our organization, that's what it's going to look like. That's what it felt like for the last 5 years. If you listened to our business community, everybody was walking into the ring to get pummeled by the heavyweight. And there's so much potential here to just do things right, clean the air, but not make it an incredible grind. So Lackey, to you, and Wayne, to you, thank you. Management was needed, and fortunately both of you delivered, and the results are pretty obvious. So I greatly appreciate it.
Thank you, Supervisor.
And I don't know how many years ago this was, we had a discussion about the computer system of a whole, as the vice chair was discussing. And we created a position, a funded position, to be like a super person over the computer department, to evaluate it and bring it in line with the kind of the back of the computer industry, and that never happened. I don't remember, that's not true. I think I do remember seeing a job description written, but I never remember it going out to be published or that person hired. So I don't know what happened to that, but I would be totally supportive of evaluation of the system. Because when I heard about their trip to San Francisco, my immediate question was, why don't we just lease a copy of their system and put it in our system? Because we would speed things up, it would seem.
Yeah, and we are working on it, Chairman Burke. We are trying to figure out whether we can truly do it or not. There are compatibility issues, but they're willing to work with us, and we can only, reciprocate, right? So we'll have the answer to your question, fairly soon.
Right. Okay. Well, thank you. I'm with Supervisor Nelson. Thank you very much for the effort and the report.
Thank you for the feedback.
Okay, moving on to item 35, since 34 was withdrawn by. Oh, I'm sorry.
Do you have sufficient direction as to whether it's the one-year option or the two, just kind of consensus from? Okay, I just want to make sure.
I apologize, Councilman. Could you repeat the question?
I was just asking if you had sufficient direction with respect to the one-year plan versus the two.
I believe so. My understanding is that there was more preference for the 2-year aspect.
Yeah, that's mine as well. So.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Good morning.
Morning. My name is Susan Nakamura. I'm acting Assistant Deputy Executive Officer in Planning and Rules, and I'm going to be presenting to you proposed amended Rule 1401, 1402, and 307.1. So, by way of background, the focus of the proposed amendments are on proposed Rule 1402. 1402 is one of 3 umbrella rules for air toxics, and it essentially implements the AB 2588 Hotspots program. Facilities in this program are required to do what we call a quadrennial report, and we evaluate these facilities, and they come through. If they're a high priority facility, then they enter into Rule 1402. Rule 1402 then requires them to prepare an air toxics inventory report, health risk assessment, and possibly a risk reduction plan. We refer to this as the traditional approach to Rule 1402. Over the years, there have been 300 facilities that have been required to prepare health risk assessments. There are about 400 facilities in the AB 2588 program. So, by way of background, in the spring of last year, the Office of Environmental Human Health Assessment revised their health risk guidelines, incorporating the child sensitivity factors, and the result was the estimated health risk for sensitive receptors was about 3 times higher. In June of 2015, we updated Rule 1402, 1401, and other guideline documents to incorporate the OEHA guidance, and the result was that we would have potentially more facilities that would be subject to health risk assessments and coming through Rule 1402. During the rule adoption, the board directed staff to look at other incentives for early risk reduction for facilities but for these risk guidelines would then be doing public notification and possibly risk reduction, and to offer an alternative public notification approach. So as we started to look at Rule 1402, we looked at the whole rule. We didn't look at just this individual thought about a voluntary program, and the result was an overall strengthening of Rule 1402. Even with the revised OEHA guidelines, we've maintained these health protective risk thresholds, and we've added provisions for potentially high-risk level facilities to accelerate their risk reduction activities. We have, in addition to the traditional approach, we are incorporating what we're referring to as a voluntary risk reduction program that will get greater risk reductions than the traditional program. The proposal that I'm presenting will also streamline implementation, reduces submittal times of health risk assessments, risk reduction plans, also reduces the risk timeframes to reduce risk and time extensions for facilities that are doing risk reduction plans. We also incorporate a number of things that we're currently implementing in our practices, and they're now kind of codified in our Rule 1402. So facilities that are subject to preparing a health risk assessment, some of these facilities will now have the opportunity to make a choice to work through the traditional process or participate in the voluntary risk reduction program. These facilities that elect to participate are then committing to a lower risk reduction threshold of a cancer risk of 10 in a million, so it represents a 60% greater risk reduction. They're going to be doing this at a faster pace in the traditional program, and they're going to be using the same quality quantification tool that we would use for the traditional program, which is the California Air Resources Board Health Assessment Reporting Program, which is referred to as HARP. So it has the same level of quantification. So what is the incentive? What's the carrot in this for facilities to participate? It's the modified public notification. And the modified public notification would be placed on our website, included in our 2588 annual report. It would identify the facilities that are participating, the address of these facilities, and facilities would not be required to do public meetings or send out individual letters. What kind of safeguards have we incorporated into this voluntary risk reduction program? The participation is selective. It's only facilities that already have prepared a health risk assessment. They've already demonstrated that their health risk is less than 25 in a million. They've already gone through public notification if it was applicable to the facility. We are not allowing facilities that are potentially high-risk facilities, facilities that their health risk is over 100 in a million. And we're using the same type of tool that we use for the traditional program, a risk reduction plan. It's enforceable, has measures that they would have to implement by certain dates. There's also a safety net. Then if a facility fails or submits a risk reduction plan that we cannot approve, that then when we send them back to the traditional program, they'd be subject to the full public notification and all the requirements under the traditional program. The other key element to the proposal is requirements for potentially high-risk facilities. As staff has gone through in more recent years, we've identified facilities either through emissions data, source tests, ambient monitoring data, that their health risk is very elevated, over 100 in a million. And what we want to do is we want to fast-track these facilities. And so what we're adding into Rule 1402 is we're adding an element of an early action risk reduction plan so we can mitigate the high risk immediately. We don't want to wait for the air toxics report, health risk assessment, risk reduction plan, which can take several years. We want to start mitigating that health risk immediately for the best public health protection. The overall result will risk reductions will start sooner. The overall result will risk reductions will be completed sooner. So as we look at the three options for Rule 1402, traditionally facilities would submit air toxics inventory report, health risk assessment, risk reduction plan. The current proposal for the traditional approach would be they would start their risk reduction sooner. For facilities that are participating in the voluntary risk reduction program, the risk reductions would start 17 months sooner because it consolidates the inventory along with their risk reduction plan to accelerate the process. And then facilities, the high-risk facilities, the early action risk reduction plan starts 22 months sooner than the current Rule 1402. So other enhancements in the proposed amendments, we're reducing the submittal times for health risk assessments and risk reduction plans. For the risk reduction time period, the requirement is that they implement the risk reductions as early as feasible, but no later than 2.5 years. We're reducing it from 2.5 years from the approval instead of 3.5 years, 3 years from the submittal. The risk reduction plan incorporates key milestones that the facility has to implement. We look at each of those milestones in terms of submitting their permits, commissioning equipment, source tests, installation, and final completion of all the measures in their plan. And we look at what is the most feasible schedule to compress it. We try to push the facility as much as we can. The Rule 1402 incorporates multiple time extensions for the risk reduction plan. This proposal is reducing the time extensions to a one-time 2.5-year time extension, and then we've increased transparency all through the rule in terms of all the requirements for submittal of requirements and the requirements for the high-risk facilities. I just want to highlight quickly the amendments to 307.1 and 1401 and the guidelines and procedures. 307.1 is our fee rule for AB 2588. We incorporated the same fee that if the folks that comply with the traditional program elect to participate in the voluntary risk reduction program, they pay the same fee. We have consolidated reporting for Rule 1401 and for 1402, so it's just a one-time reporting to the board when we have a change in our health risk values that OEHA comes out with for toxic air contaminants, and we would just incorporate that in our AB 2588 report to the board. We've updated the public notification requirements to include the modified notification for the voluntary program, and then we're modifying the requirements for facilities that we want to take hold of the responsibility for logistics for public meetings, scheduling public meetings, the location, security, translation, and the facility would then either directly pay or reimburse us. And then we've developed guidelines for the voluntary risk reduction program. Recommended actions are to certify the environmental assessment, amend Rule 1401, 1402, 307.1, approve the procedures, the notification procedures, and the guidelines for the voluntary risk reduction program. That concludes my presentation.
Thank you very much for your presentation. We do have testimony on this item. Mr. Quinn?
Mr. Chairman, I have a question, if I could
for staff?
ask
Okay.
Susan. You went over it kind of quickly, but maybe you could once again go over the reasons that someone would do a voluntary reduction program as opposed to the traditional way. I mean, why would you do that?
The primary reason is the modified public notification. So when 20 plus years ago, when Rule 1402 started with the AB 25 Hotspots Act, the most effective tool was public notification. And so facilities were willing to make additional reductions to go below the notification level to avoid public notification. And so as we amended Rule 1402 last year, facilities started to approach us and stakeholders saying that it's but for the OEHA guidance that they're having to do the notification, and they want to have that same opportunity now to make reductions, and they're willing to go further in the reductions of what they would need to do, because the threshold's 25 in a million. They're willing to go below 10 in a million to have a modified public notification. So that is the huge carrot in the program.
Okay, thank you. That's a good explanation.
Thank you very much for your presentation.
Good morning, members of the board. My name is Bill Quinn. I'm with CEEB, the California Council for Environmental and Economic Balance. We're here today to support the staff's proposal. As staff presented and described, the voluntary program encourages facilities to reduce risk well below the action levels, meaning risk will be reduced beyond what is required and about 17 months faster. These voluntary reductions happen in addition to the increased stringency of AB 2588 under the new OEHA guidelines for health risk assessment. Taken together, the rule amendments before you significantly strengthen public health protection and risk reduction from lower air toxics. We also want to thank and commend the district staff for the collaborative approach. While it will still be a challenge for facilities to meet the tighter public notification and risk reduction thresholds, we believe that staff develop compliance pathways and schedules that are aggressive yet achievable, and we think that 1402 can be a model for other air districts as they update their own 2588 program. So we encourage your support, and we thank you.
Mr. Quinn. That concludes our testimony on this item.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
I have a concern in the area. First of all, I would say that I agree with staff's report with the exception of one specific area, and that is those that are considered to be the hot spots, or the hot points that really, really have problems. Looking at and having read the entire staff report in details, and using the word itself of most feasible methods by which to accomplish the reductions that they need. We have gone through now in our region 2 very extensive hotspot areas of Exide and Aliso Canyon. And I think that after I read this and I took the time to go through and just postulate certain arguments, it seems to me that if we use the word itself, most feasible alternatives, someone could reasonably say that they could take up to 2.5 to 3 years in order to make it most reasonable. I think if we're talking about someone that we know that is really putting out vile air pollutants, that we should basically say that those times themselves should be certainly less than if they go through a voluntary program. Voluntary program, we're allowing them not to have public hearings, not to have public input, not to have the public come and make comments. That we should really have a very definitive time something similar to that of 2 years, that it should not be greater than that of 2 years. I don't think they should have the same amount of time as someone, say that they don't have to go through all of those other kind of areas, et cetera, voluntary. And as Susan said just a moment ago, is that if they fail, then we put them back into that particular program. That's like putting the cat in the bag, if they ever were out of the bag. I don't think that's what our job is, to sit here and make rules to incentivize people for following our air, and we know it. And I just don't see that the two are consistent. So I would propose that amendment, if we want to go through, and I think it's excellent staff work. I want to, first of all, state that if we really are going to basically say something, that we should say the hotspots should be no more than that of 2 years, rather than giving them the same amount of time that someone else would have who have now gone through the voluntary processes, et cetera. So that's what my comment itself would be to my colleagues, and I think that looking at it is not to criticize staff's position and the input that Mr. Canton and the community and the business have really looked at it, but I think we all can agree that we've gone through a lot of criticism on this board of not being active enough to say that we know about something and not really doing something about it that would show that we really are really very concerned about eradicating those situations that are very injurious to the people's health and welfare in our area and where we have the ultimate responsibility. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you for your comments. You and I hadn't discussed that previously, but it's interesting that I was thinking almost exactly the same things, but I couldn't figure out why we hadn't gone to 2 years on that. But my colleagues here must have an opinion.
Wayne has something. Wayne have something?
Oh, Wayne? Yes, I'm sorry.
Dr. Burke, if I may, Dr. Parker raises an excellent point with regards to these so-called high emitters. And under the program, and Susan can correct me if I'm wrong, those high emitters wouldn't actually, or most likely wouldn't qualify for this program. But having said that, it does make sense to try to minimize the time that we do go through health risk assessment. And so if we were to move forward as suggested, that's something that we can accomplish. One of the concerns that we had is that there's actual delays in other aspects associated with the permitting that could cause the applicant to ask for an extension. And the concern is we didn't want to allow for too many extensions, so we have right now the one extension. But I think that we can go ahead and move forward with the 2 years, because I do agree with all of the points that Dr. Parker made. And I would just ask Susan if there's any additional points.
No, I just want to clarify, though. So there's basically kind of 3 tracks in the risk reduction requirement. So there's the traditional, the voluntary, and the high risk. So just so I understand your the thought is that we would just change for the potentially high-risk facilities instead of 2.5 years, a 2-year time frame for the risk reduction?
That's correct.
Okay.
Would it be appropriate for me to make an amendment itself to the resolution? I would move that we adopt the staff's recommendation with the modification that for high-risk facilities, that would be a 2-year maximum period in lieu of that of the 2.5 years that have been set forth in the.
I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second, or is there any opposition to this? Hearing none, this is approved. Item 37. kitchen looking for it.
So, I apologize. So this is a relatively routine item. I would recommend waiving the waiving the presentation. I don't see any speaker cards.
Better than getting shot, huh? Do I have a motion on this item?
I believe that we've got consensus from all involved on this one, and the presentation would be necessary at this time, and I would move approval.
Second.
Any opposition to this item?
We have comment cards? We did.
Oh, wait. No, we do have comment cards.
Is this a-
But I think they should maybe.
This is on 37.
They all.
We 36.
We're on 36. This is on 37. There's no comment.
This is on
card.
36, on the men regulation
Yeah.
9.
Oh, okay. We're on 36.
Yes.
Right.
36 is no problem.
Well, that's what Supervisor Benoit was just saying. Okay, we have a motion and a second. Is there any opposition to item 36? Hearing none, item 36 is approved. We will now go to 37, which we have a number of speakers' cards on.
I think you just got 37 through because that's what you said. Yeah, right.
Hello. So I'm presenting to you today on proposed amended rule 2002, the shutdown provisions for NOx reclaim. In December 2015, staff had a proposal for shutdown provisions. The board directed staff to go back to the working group, work on the proposal, further analysis, and closer alignment with command and control. So I'm here today to talk about the proposed changes in terms of the shutdown provision. So the rule development process essentially started after the public hearing in December. Since that time, staff had 5 working group meetings. We've had monthly briefings with environmental groups, and through the process, we received over 10 comment letters, public workshop, and then we're here today to present the staff's proposal. So the applicability of the proposal is that it would apply to the largest NOx facilities. These are the facilities that we refer to as in Rule 2002, the Table 7 and 8 facilities. This is similar to the proposal in December with some nuances which I'll highlight in a little later in this slide. These facilities represent 90% of the holdings. Their average holdings when we look at these facilities is about 170 tons per year. As we look at the other facilities that are not on Table 7 and 8, their average holdings are about 5 tons per year. This proposal applies to facility-wide shutdowns. The December proposal looked at facility-wide and equipment shutdowns. We believe that facility-wide shutdowns have a greater potential if they were to shut down and to be coming back into the market for the potential delay in controls. Similar to the December proposal, this is a forward-looking shutdown provisions in that we're not going retroactively after a facility that has shut down, asking them to surrender RTCs or to adjust their holdings, but we would, after date of adoption, the shutdown provisions would apply. And this is a difference in the 2015 proposal is that we're only looking at those facilities in Table 7 and 8 that have an initial allocation. Facilities that came in after 1994 are required to secure their RTCs each year. They weren't issued an allocation and don't have that infinite year block of credits. I just wanted to highlight some of the key provisions in the shutdown provision. The calculation methodology focuses on equipment that is operating at a level that is over BARC, and we adjust those emissions to a BARC level. Anything that's below BARC, there's no adjustment. The facility can hold on to those RTCs, which leads to the proposal does not require full forfeiture of RTCs at shutdown. There is a requirement that a facility that had sold future year RTCs and they were to shut down, that we would require the facility to go to the open market if they had insufficient RTCs to purchase these infinite year block RTCs. The proposal also includes provisions for facilities that may have a temporary shutdown or temporary non-operating, planned non-operating equipment they may have for cyclical economic reasons or just the nature of the equipment. For example, peaking units will have fluctuations in terms of their use. We recognize that, the rule recognizes that for those facilities. The rule also, similar to the December proposal, includes provisions for common ownership. The proposal in December for common ownership looked at also the same function of the equipment. This focuses on common ownership for that they're under the same parent company, and it allows the operational flexibility for those facilities. There's a process for the facilities to declare that they are under common ownership and for the proposal. So how this works, in terms of the opportunity for facilities to be notified, the facility can come to us, tell us that they're shutting down, they're surrendering their permits, or the executive officer, by reviewing their annual report, will send a notice to the facility identifying that we believe that they're shutting down, then give the facility an opportunity to respond to us, to explain to us what the decrease in their emissions are. If we deem the facility as shut down, then we would begin the process to then calculate the amount of RTCs that would be deducted from their holdings. The maximum amount of RTCs that we would deduct from a facility's holding wouldn't exceed their adjusted initial allocation. And we would allow the facility during the time period that we're assessing the amount of RTCs to be deducted to sell discrete year RTCs within that compliance year. That's a difference from the December proposal. As we deduct a facility's future holdings, then the facility, if there are any remaining holdings, would be able to keep those holdings. So what's the efficacy of our proposal? What does this all mean? So if we were to look at the Cal Portland scenario, if this rule was in effect, and at the time when they were shutting down, how many RTCs would be removed from the market? About 700 tons per year beginning 2010. So what does that mean? That means in 2010, that wouldn't have been a full forfeiture of RTCs for the facility. In 2010, they would have still had a remaining 20 tons per year. But as the proposal goes down and their holdings were decreasing, after 2010, it would go down to 10 tons. And then by 2016, if this proposal was in effect based on their holdings, they would then be down to 0. So in terms of looking at that infinite year block of RTCs into the future, it would diminish, and by 2016, there would be no RTCs available. Another question in regards to that we wanted to address was that by excluding these facilities that are not on table 7 and 8, what does that mean? Is there a concern that if they were to shut down, that there could be delay in control for other facilities? So we created a scenario looking at a refinery. So by 2022, an average refinery would need about 200 tons per year of NOx RTCs. And so our analysis showed that by excluding these smaller facilities, the facilities not on table 7 and 8, it would have very little effect in terms of delaying installation and controls for refineries. So as we look at these facilities that are not on table 7 and 8, their average holdings are 5 tons per year. It would take about 40 of these smaller facilities to equate to the need for an average refinery post-2022. Then looking at the table 7 and 8 facilities and the top 10 of those facilities, by doing an average, are we skewing it? We looked at the top 10 facilities, and these top 10 facilities, when you look at their holdings relative to their emissions, their holdings are substantially lower than their emissions. It would take about 10 of these top 10 facilities to make up the difference for the need for one refinery. On average. And some of these top 10 facilities, to give you a sense, they're breweries, one is LAX, so it gives you the sense of the magnitude of the type of facilities and the likelihood of them shutting down. The last issue that I wanted to highlight was, how does the proposal align with command and control? On the issue of discounting, that both programs, if you look at command and control, new source review, and reclaim, there's a discount. New source review, command and control is discounting to BACT. We're recommending a discount to a BARC level. In terms of looking at the basis of throughput, both are based on an average of 2 years. We're looking at the average of 2 years over a 5-year period, the average of the highest 2 years over a 5-year period. And then both programs do not provide any credit that goes beyond their bright line of BACT or BARC. So the recommendations today are to adopt the resolution, certify the addendum from the 2015 final program environmental assessment, and adopt proposed amended rule 2002.
Susan, I do have one question for you. Has anybody expressed opposition to this?
The the gigantic key issue is that the industry stakeholders, some industry stakeholders have expressed they just don't feel that the provision is needed.
Have they opposed it?
I don't know if, I don't think they're opposing it, yeah.
Do we have any
Yeah,
opposition?
they can speak,
cards?
yeah.
We do.
Okay. Oh, then I guess we'll hear from whoever opposes it.
Right.
Thank you.
All right, with that, we'll go ahead and take testimony. Mr. Acevedo, Ms. Sierra Club. Maybe he's already left. Christopher, maybe Chang from Burbank. There we go.
My name is Christopher.
Go ahead and pull that mic up. Thank you. Uh-oh, not that high.
All right, thank you. Okay. My name is Christopher Chuang, and I'm from the Burbank City Attorney's Office, speaking on behalf of Burbank Water and Power. I'm here to object to the current draft of Rule 2002. On August 30th, the very last working group meeting, district staff proposed a new change to the proposed Rule 2002(i)(7). Under this new revision, a facility may be subject to shutdown review if the district determines that its APEP report shows a substantial decrease in facility-wide operations. This is a very vague and ambiguous term, and it is not defined. In fact, this revision removes the previous numerical standard that was set forth in the preliminary draft of July 21st that BWP had supported. How does this affect BWP? BWP has peaker facilities that operate and serve peak demand and ensure reliability for the grid. By their very nature, BW peakers have irregular usage, and increases and decreases in emissions are not readily classified as temporary, cyclical, economic, or any of the other outs that was previously described. The word peaker never is mentioned here in their rule. We've asked for that, but they have not put that in there. BWP does not want to emit more than necessary. But how, in the absence of an objective standard, is a utility to behave to avoid being shut down? BWP may be forced to increase its NOx emissions to avoid being shut down, even though it doesn't want to. This is tantamount to asking someone to essentially drive safely without setting any speed limits. How are we to know? We have talked with the district informally and they have offered us a letter of assurance, but this does not provide us adequate legal protection. Moreover, they have also suggested that we can always challenge a shutdown by appeal. This is problematic because not only would this take time and resources, but the standard of review would be very deferential to district staff. The district also needs to consider whether this rule poses a problem for itself. Does this broad discretion of authority somehow constitute an ultra-virus act, an improper delegation of authority? Can this set up the district for a takings claim because it's using its very broad discretion to essentially shut down an owner's asset and take it away from it? How does the district ultimately want its utilities and operators to behave in a responsible fashion under this rule? What substantial decrease? What is it? 70%? 80%? 90%? BWP wants to avoid violating any rules, but when the rules are ambiguous, it puts the ratepayers at risk. We respectfully request that the governing board direct staff to find a reasonable, objective, quantifiable measure that is fair to owners or create a very clear exemption for peaker units and in the absence of that, not adopt the current draft of Rule 2002. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Wayne, do you have some answers for that?
Yeah, I'm going to ask Susan to speak to the specific issues. I think there's a fundamental difference in understanding.
So Burbank Water and Power approached us this week in regards to their concern about proposed amended Rule 2002. And so we met with Burbank, and then we followed up with a letter to explain the provisions of Rule 2002 and how it addresses their concern. And so the rule previously did have a bright line, and we removed the bright line in anticipation that there could be facilities that could be just a little above or a little below, and then we added a criteria. Before, the rule had specific identifying specific reasons why someone would be not shut down, but we felt that not every facility is going to fit into that particular list of things, so we put a criteria. And in the listing of the criteria, we listed some examples that said including but not limited to. So it could be economic fluctuation and some other things. So Burbank is saying that because we didn't list in the including but not limited to, that therefore they're excluded. But we've explained to them, we sent them a letter, I brought it up in the presentation, that we understand that a facility will have fluctuations for economic reasons, cyclical reasons, and, for example, a peaker. They're going to use it more 1 year, less 1 year. That's not what we're looking for in terms of a facility shutdown. The other thing that we've added into the rules before was that once we identify this bright line, which we removed from the rule, that we would then tell the facility that they're deemed shut down. We've included a process. So the process is that we're going to notify the facility that we think that they're shut down. Then we give the facility 60 days to respond to us why they're not shut down. So we incorporated the process for the facility to work with us before we make any determination to deem the facility shut down. We sent a letter to the facility. We explained it to them in the meeting. We feel there's, in terms of an issue with a peaker unit, if their concern is about just receiving the notification, it's a process. We're just telling them this is what we see. We give them the opportunity to argue back. And then also, Jill mentioned that they can go to the hearing board. So if we were to deem the facility shut down, they always have the opportunity to go to the hearing board. That's the last resort.
Okay. All right. Our next commenter, George from Energy. George, help me on your last name here. Picante? Am I way off?
George Pianca, no problem.
Thank you.
Good morning, Chair Burke and fellow board members. I'm George Pianca, Senior Director of Environmental for NRG's West Region, and I'm speaking on behalf of NRG in support of Agenda Item 37. The reclaim provisions that are before you, we've been very active with industry and directly with staff. Really appreciate all of our comments that were considered for these specific facility shutdown provisions. We've been a stakeholder for several years. In December, we gave comments and supported the deferral of the facility shutdowns, and so the provisions today certainly represent an improvement that we support. I'd like to thank Mr. Nastri and his team, specifically Dr. Phil Fine, Terry Goss, Gary Quinn, and Kevin Arellana. I also want to take the opportunity to thank an item that was discussed earlier. Thank Lockie and his team on the permit backlog. We certainly support that effort. We're among the many permit holders, and we look forward to doing our part to help that backlog on our sites. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Bill Quinn, followed by Curtis Coleman.
Good morning, Bill Quinn with SEEB again, and George Piotrek is a member of SEEB, and my comments are ditto. Let's go to lunch.
Yeah. All right. Good man.
Kurt Coleman, good morning, for the Southern California Air Quality Alliance. Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. I'm happy to be able to stand up here and once again echo the other comments and thank the staff, Mr. Nastri, Dr. Fine, and all the staff who worked on this rule. We had a very good exchange of ideas. I made a number of comments, and I think all of them, with perhaps one that doesn't affect any of my members, were responded to positively, and it was just a very gratifying experience to have that level of back and forth and compromising and getting to a point where this isn't something we love, but it's something we can live with, and I think it accomplishes the staff's and the board's objectives too, of avoiding what are perceived as abuses of the use of reclaimed trading credits to avoid a BART. So I just want to thank the board for deferring it and the staff for working collaboratively to resolve this issue. Thank you.
Thank you. Board member comments?
I'll just say that this item was deferred from our December 2016 agenda, no, 2015 agenda. What year is it? But I want to thank staff for working on this and working collaboratively with the stakeholders. This was a really controversial issue. It has been a sort of thorn in the side of SCAQMD as we watch some of these credits escape into the industry and avoid, and thereby avoid getting to BART. So this, I think, is a good plan working with industry. So we're not, we're looking at what is really a shutdown and giving some flexibility there for situations where it's not really a complete shutdown. Thank you, staff, for working on that. Dr. Fine, I know you spent a lot of time on this. Thank you very much.
Councilman Cacciari.
Thank you, Vice Chair. I echo your comments, and I want to make a comment with regard to Burbank. It's one of the cities I represent in my region, and echoing their concerns, I want to make sure that the intent of our language and our discussion today is if there ever is a court challenge, that there's flexibility in this, and there's time for them to appeal, to come to the board and work on this issue. So there's language that this is in the minutes, that is our intent not to shut them down, but to work with agencies such as Burbank, Glendale, Water and Power to work these issues out. So if this issue ever comes up, the letter will show, if it ever goes to Goyer, and that's our intent to work with the agencies, but not to shut them down.
Yeah,
Thank you.
The language is actually in the rule.
In the rule, so
Yep.
it's clear, right?
Right.
Thanks. And I wanted the legislative body's comments to be written down, because that's when courts look at things, whether it's state or local or regional, they look at what the board considered in making their determination. That's how you ascertain legislative intent. By looking at our comments today, the comments we talked about and deliberated, and the court will look at that in determining what our legislative intent was. So I just made my comments part of the legislative intent. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I have a question to Kurt. I read the 270 pages of this entire document. I have really two questions, and I think that Board Member Cascio really made it very clear, is that what is the intent itself of this rule? In reading that, is it staff's intent and the legal department intent when they drafted this to make sure that they made it very clear that these credits themselves belong to the district? They are the districts then have exclusive sole rights itself under the circumstances which we have outlined in this rule. That is to lower them, to adjust them, but not for them to be sold on a total shutdown without all of those other provisions notwithstanding, to basically become the ownership itself of someone who's shutting down and leaving town.
I think the better way to understand this, Dr. Parker, and what the intent of the staff is to acknowledge a longstanding truth about the credits, and that's that they're not property. So the holders of those credits don't have a property interest in them. And so the board can deal with them on a regulatory basis appropriately by reducing the credits, by requiring their forfeiture on shutdown without triggering all the requirements that would occur when a takings occur.
Okay. I just wanted to make that very clear, because in reading that, I assumed that was the overall intent itself. And unlike that of what has happened in the past, that we have had situations where these credits themselves have been sold into the market, the companies have closed, moved out of town, and taken the money with them, and we're left to basically do the cleanup, or to basically still deal with the quality issues without those credits being put into BART retrofitted technology to reduce the pollutions itself in the air. Thank you.
All right, anyone else? Not seeing you, we'll look for a motion.
Move approval.
I have a motion by Cacciodi. Judith, thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So moved. All right, we're on to public comment. I have a small group of cards here. Daryl Gale from Los Angeles. Come on down. Followed by Anthony Bautista.
Good afternoon, board and staff and concerned citizens. I came out here in the 5:45 a.m. Metrolink train this morning, and of course I'm stuck here till 4:47, but that's okay because it's a very nice little city. I'll walk around it later on. One of the reasons I moved to downtown LA was because I wanted to live in a solar apartment and have access to public transportation. And, you know, I know you're all sick of hearing about the fact that I live in an apartment that has 115 solar panels on it, but all the residents basically have, you know, free electricity, free air conditioning, free heat. It's not that we need heat much anymore, but anyway. So I just wanted to thank the staff. I went to a Huntington Beach workshop very recently, and it was very nice to meet the local activists in the Huntington Beach area, and I think it's great that if you're going to have more and more workshops or meetings in the areas, especially where people are affected, so that everybody, you know, it's very hard for a lot of people to come out to the, you know, the Copley Drive place. But what I was kind of surprised when I went to Huntington Beach, and I had to go there on Amtrak, and then I had to take an Uber because there was no other way to get there other than the long, long, slow bus, was that whenever I travel, I'm always looking for businesses or I'm looking for homes that have solar on them to see who's helping out with the solution instead of being part of the problem. And I was very disappointed. I saw very few homes in Huntington Beach with solar panels. And after the workshop was over, I walked about 1.5 miles back to the Pacific Coast Highway so I could get the Pacific Coast Highway bus back to Long Beach. And I saw tons and tons of, you know, really nice homes with no solar panels and lots of people driving SUVs. So it was just, Dr. Fine was talking about, you know, public acceptance. Well, I just wanted to bring up just basically an open-ended question. You know, we need public responsibility and public awareness that we're all part of the problem, and how can we let people know? Maybe it's more community meetings, maybe it's more things on YouTube from your agency, but we've got to get more people involved, especially the people who live in communities like Huntington Beach and who are buying all this crap that's coming through the, you know, Long Beach port and the San Pedro port, and it's all these trucks coming into these big box stores, and these people are filling their houses and their SUVs with giant globs of plastic crap, and it's just contributing to the communities and the people like outside yelling about bad air. So thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for joining us all the way out here. And yeah, we're working on getting more trains on a regular basis in the midday, and I have that same problem when I go into LA, coming back. Anthony Bautista. Possibly already left. Gabriel Felix. Raul from the Sierra Club. Raul. I think we had a lot of people that may have put a card in and have already left. Joycelyn Gomez from the Sierra Club. Ignacio Ocha. Christina Gorza from the Sierra Club. Garza. And Jose Olancha. All right, going once. Anyone else would like to make a public comment? Not seeing any. That takes us to board member travel. Anyone have any report, or is that attached? I believe it's attached. Okay. And then we'll go into closed session. All right.
it is necessary for the board to recess the closed session pursuant to Government Code Sections 54956.9A and 54956.9D1 to confer with its counsel regarding pending litigation, which has been initiated formally, which the SCAQMD is a party. The actions are SCAQMD versus City of Moreno Valley et al. Riverside Superior Court case number RIC 1511213 and RIC 1601988 World Logistics Center. It's also necessary for the board to recess the closed session pursuant to Government Code Section 54956.9A and 54956.9D4 to consider initiation of litigation in 2 cases.
I know.
You know, I went there, she said it's automatic till 1 o'clock, which if you want to get in your room, you got to go get your key checked, otherwise you'll be able to get in your room. They changed your keys. Yeah, 12 years. Now you can get your ID. Whatever they said, you can't change it without your ID. Hey, how are you doing? Thank you, Nancy.
But yeah, I will mention sometimes they do that. And just stamp it. Yeah, they did that at the Billboard, but it's a different situation. Oh, no problem. Thank you so much. Sorry. Our instructions are to leave. Yeah, no, we're a little late. Yeah. It's running a little late. We're close. Okay. Okay. Yeah, we're getting there.
Yeah, I think I lost my parking.
You know what? I thought I lost my keys at the Eclipse. Not Eclipse, but Escalade, but I put it in the box.
Okay, I lost my parking. Ticket.
You know, I saw it in your hand last night.
Yeah, so I think.
Where did you put it? I think it was in the CNG car.
No, I think I took it back, and when I checked
Oh,
in.
no, I know. Yeah, you turned it in. But did you have to get a new one? Yeah, I didn't get a new one. I think it was in this box. I checked in this box. Well, you know what? No, he'll go to the table where he was. Ladies and gentlemen, we need to do a public records announcement. So we can have it quiet, please, for just a second. We're going to go on the record. So we can have it quiet just for a moment, please. Stand by, Kurt. Can you sit in your, like, you know, just...
you need to do it on video.
Like at home. Yeah, what's that? Stand by.
A report of the reportable actions taken in closed session will be filed with the clerk of the board and made available to the public upon request. The meeting is adjourned.
Let's roll it still for a little longer until we have a slate. Thank you, folks. Guys, he says this, I'll be back to my recording. So yeah. So we get flash drive. That's okay. That's the whole reason. So she's not even going to go enjoy the dinner. She's going to go back and start working.